Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us at this regular meeting of the Madera City Council. If I can have roll call, please.
Mayor Andrew Medellin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose Rodriguez absent. Councilmember Cece Foley Gallegos.
Here.
Councilmember Will Oliver.
Here.
Councilmember Derek Robinson.
Here.
Councilmember Charles Rigby.
Here.
And Councilmember Donald Hawley.
Present.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us from New Life Assembly Pastor Fred Thurman, who will be leading us in the invocation. If you will stand with me, please.
Thank you. Our Father, we just come into your presence this evening and thank you for the much grace that you offer us. And we thank you for this agenda this evening, God, as we go through it, that, Lord, the answers come and wisdom and understanding are given. Lord, we thank you, Father, that you have the best for our city in mind, and that, God, you share it with us as we deal with these issues. We give you praise tonight and thank you for your intervention in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Fred. If you'll join me in the pledge, please. Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on to public comment, the first 15 minutes of the meeting are reserved for members of the public to address the council on items which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers will be asked to identify themselves and state the subject of their comment. If the subject is an item on the agenda, the mayor has the option of asking the speaker to hold the comment until that item is called. Comments on items listed as public hearing on the agenda should be held until that item is opened. The council is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusions should be drawn if the council does not respond to public comment at this time. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak under this definition of public comment? Please come forward to the podium, and as a reminder, if you would state your name and address.
Hello, my name is Alexis Luna. My address is 401 James Way, Madera, California. The topic I'll be talking about today is the transit dowel ride. I like to start off by starting. Rude staff, they don't care to listen, overtalk you, and have no respect for the community that pays for this service. This is a review for the City of Madera's dial ride service. When making an appointment for the dial ride, the dispatchers are extremely rude by being disrespectful, putting us on hold for long amounts of time, and even going as far as not putting our appointments down, even though we gave them all their information needed. Now, I am a college student at the Madera Community College, and I do work there as well as an ambassador. Now, imagine being a student waiting for the bus not to pick you up. Now, imagine being that student and having a very important lecture that day. Now, imagine being that student and having a final that day. Now, switching up to a Madera citizen, imagine waiting for the bus, not having to pick you up when you have a flight, or imagine the bus not being able to pick you up during an appointment. It is not fair that we have to miss out because of a dispatcher not wanting to do their job. It is not fair that a student has to miss even a day of their education because the dispatcher does not want to do their job. It is not fair for the Madera citizen to change their plans just because a dispatcher does not want to do their job. Students and citizens alike should not be treated so disrespectfully for doing everyday tasks that require taking the bus. According to the City of Madera 2010's board survey, 60% of riders are students and working class. One will think that most of the revenue is coming from a certain group that they will be treated more respectfully. Now, I am bringing this to you because the actions reflect on you. The Transit Advisory Board that was appointed by individual Madera City Council members. The lack of actions reflect on you. It reflects on the city, giving Darrell a ride at 2.7 stars. Most of the reviews being a 1 star. I will end with the reviews listed. Quote, really rude. Every time one of them answers, they just hang up on me. End quote. Quote, my mom is handicapped, so she uses them. However, service is not so great. I was told to expect a ride from my mom, not only to show up. Thank you.
Ms. Luna, thank you very, very much for coming down here. It took a lot of courage to come down here, and we all really, really appreciate the insight that you have given us. I do want to extend an invitation to speak with me personally. I'm going to have somebody get your personal information, if you don't mind. A couple of us members here as council members also serve on the Transportation Commission, and we've worked very, very hard over the past couple of years to extend service for those students who simply just do not have a ride to school. And we pride ourselves in the city of Madera on customer service. So if in any way we can improve that by people coming down here and sharing their experience, we're definitely going to do that. So we take this very, very serious. And again, I thank you for coming down here and sharing this with us. I will also say on April 18th will be our next Madera County Transportation Commission meeting where we actually will discuss unmet needs and things that you were talking about. So if you don't mind sharing with Ms. Yvette your information, I'd be happy to contact you personally. Thank you for coming down. She's right here. Anyone else wishing to speak under public comment, please come forward. Seeing none, I will close public comment and just let anybody in the audience know that item D1 regarding the Arts Council has been pulled this evening. So if anybody's here for item D1, we will not be discussing that this evening. And I will now ask Sonia for a late distribution announcement.
Thank you, Mayor. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, members of the public are advised that documents related to the following agenda item were distributed to the council after the packet was finalized. Under Section A, workshop item A1 is a workshop with the compensation study consultant. A comparator agency analysis handout from Coffin Associates was distributed to the council. Extra copies are available at the podium for members of the public wishing a copy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. I have a couple of presentations this evening, starting with our 21st Annual Relay for Life here in Madera. So I will call up my fourth grade teacher, which I do have to say that was the first time in the history ever that they hired a 14-year-old to be a fourth grade teacher, known as Miss Peart, and you will always be Miss Peart to me. But has been instrumental in Relay for Life. A number of us here have participated in Relay for Life here in Madera, where we raise money, obviously, for cancer research. But here in Madera it goes above and beyond that, and how we support those that are dealing with cancer, and we remember those that have lost their battle with cancer. And as we get together as a community for a 24-hour period, we really do come together as one large family. And for that, I personally, and I can speak for the council, that we are very appreciative of the efforts of all the members of Relay for Life. And I have this official certificate declaring the Relay for Life weekend, which will be on May 5th. Cinco de Mayo, you did that on purpose. Thank you very much.
No, not really.
So now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Mayor Andrew Medillon, on behalf of the Madera City Council, do hereby proclaim May 5th and 6th, 2018 as Relay for Life weekend. Yes, you will. And of course, now you have a few words to say, I'm sure.
I wasn't prepared for that. We're always looking for help. We're always looking to get our survivors registered because we celebrate them, right, Marianne? Mm-hmm. Marianne C. is one of our wonderful survivors. Sonia is the team captain of the City of Madera team. We always need donations. But come on out, if nothing else. Just come out and have a good time and enjoy some food and fellowship. Cry, smile, laugh. It's a good time.
Yes, it is.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. course you can. Now we will, I have a proclamation celebrating the Week of the Young Child, which is April 16th through 20th. Shanara, Ms. Black, if you please come forward. We should be celebrating children every day. And as Ms. Black will attest, Madera County First Five obviously does wonderful, wonderful things with our children ages 1 to 5, and it puts them on the right path. And so if you don't mind saying a few words first about the program, and then I'd be happy to offer this proclamation.
Well, good evening. My name is Shanira Black. I'm the Executive Director for First Five Madera County. I've been in this role for about 20 years now, and it never gets boring or stale to come before the City Council and my colleagues and talk about children 0 to 5 years old. We invest a lot of money into a lot of different services in the community, all of which are important. But investing in young children is an opportunity to do some preventative work so that we can take care of children earlier on and not have to see them in our probation system, in our special needs education system, and so forth. So thank you very much, Mayor, for acknowledging Week of the Young Child. As always, it's great to be a partner with the city.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so very, very much. Wonderful. We will see you soon. Thanks
Yes,
for
sir.
coming down.
Thank you.
And speaking of partnerships, besides Madera County First Five, we have a wonderful partnership with United Way. And if I can call Ms. Callahan up here. United Way has done so many wonderful things in partnering in the city of Madera, but we have this proclamation recognizing the free tax preparation and helping those families here in the city of Madera that not only can get the preparation for free, but a number of them go without refunds that were entitled to them. So again, thank you so very much for your partnership and what you're doing for those families here in the city of Madera. I'll turn it over to you so you can say a few words about United Way and what you're doing here in Madera.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for honoring United Way and recognizing their free tax preparation services. This year, we're partnering with the Madera Workforce, and so we're offering tax preparation services at the Madera Workforce Center on Cleveland Avenue on Tuesdays and Wednesdays between 5:30 and 8:30. It's completely free for anyone who makes less than $54,000 a year. We also offer an online service called myfreetaxes.org, which is free for anyone who makes less than $66,000 a year. We are very passionate about taxes. Maybe you're not, but I am, because we truly believe that money in working families' pockets and working individuals' pockets and more money in their cash in their pockets will make a difference to really close the gap every month and help them provide for their families. So we're happy to provide this service. CAPMC is also providing free tax services. All of our volunteers are trained certified IRS professionals. So our volunteers are trained, and we take care of everything. There's no catch to this. It's completely free. I brought some flyers to leave behind if any of the city council members want to take them with them to distribute to their constituents. And it's very simple. You just dial 866-559-4211 to make an appointment. And you can also come down to my building to get your taxes done. We service the entire Fresno and Madera communities. So thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to continuing to partner.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to read this. Yes. So now, therefore, let it be resolved that this 21st day of March, by the members of the Madera City Council, Mayor Andrew Medilla, Mayor Pro Tem Jose Rodriguez, City Council members William Oliver, C.C. Foley Gallegos, Derek Robinson, Donald Hawley, and Charles Rigby, that the United Way of Fresno and Madera counties be commended for offering this valuable free tax preparation service. Thank you so very, very much. Looks like Chuck got the picture already,
Okay.
I'm assuming.
Check out the picture.
Chuck got the picture already?
Shaking hands.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Moving on to the next presentation, this will be by CASA, which is the Court Appointed Special Advocates for Children. Mr. Lee will be doing the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. And I have with me Jeff Del Cerro, who's a member of the Board of Directors. He'll be saying a few words, as will Jane Couts, one of our volunteers, and Megan Bean, our recruiting specialist.
Great.
CASA has been active. Court-appointed special advocates has been active in Fresno and Madera counties since 1996 in Fresno County, but 2006 in Madera County. And this essential purpose of it is to find citizens that look a lot like us, that we recruit and train and support, and we make available to the court to assign to a foster care case. So you may have 1 to 5 kids that have been removed from their home because of abuse and neglect. The judge has the prerogative to assign CASA, and then we match one of our volunteers with the case. Volunteers do 3 things. 1, because the system has a lot of children in it, 2,500 in the 2 counties and generally 300 to 500 in Madera County, it's difficult for the judges to get good information because social workers' time is stretched and they're often overburdened with cases. So our volunteers do an investigation of the situation for the children, 1 case at a time. So even though the volunteer is a volunteer, not an employee, not a professional, they are able to spend more time with children than the professionals are able to spend. So they'll report back to the judge and recommend solutions that the judge can act on in the form of a court report. That's the main product of the advocate's work. The second thing that our volunteers do is that they advocate for a healthy and successful future for kids in foster care. So kids are individual. They are individualistic. They have their own needs, and they need someone to watch out for those details in their lives. So our advocates are checking with the foster parent, the social worker, the attorney, the healthcare provider, the therapist, and all those individuals, and especially schools and educators. And when they find issues and problems, they will advocate and speak up for the kids and try to get issues resolved. The third thing they do is they befriend kids who go through many changes when they're in foster care. Placement changes, social worker changes, school changes. If we can give 1 mature adult to those children in foster care, it makes a big difference in their lives. So I'm going to actually next call on Jeff, so he's going to share a few words from his experience as a member of the board. That will be followed by Jane, and Megan is going to make a pitch for your help, and then I'll be back for a minute.
Great.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for giving us a few moments to talk about CASA tonight. I really appreciate it, particularly Council Member Oliver. I understand we have you to thank specifically for our invitation tonight, so thank you. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes praising the advocates who provide the services to the foster youth in the community. You're going to have an opportunity to hear from Jane in a little bit, and she's really a stellar example of the type of people that come into our organization to provide direct services to these folks, young folks. Each board meeting starts with something that we call a mission moment, and that's usually an opportunity to talk about either a particularly disappointing outcome, but more often a successful one. One of the ones that really stuck with me was one of our advocates came in a few weeks ago and they told us about a situation where they had had the privilege of attending a graduation for their youth that they were working with, and that advocate was the only person there for that young person at their graduation. And I don't know, for some reason, growing up in a small town and having an opportunity to be so close with so many people, that just really hit home with me. So I want to really give props to our advocates. They're wonderful members of our community, and it's an honor to get to know them. My main ask for you tonight, though, is to help us raise the profile of CASA in Madera. We have, as Nathan said, a large number of foster youth that are looking for help and direction, and our advocates need to be there to provide services to them. Currently here in Madera, we have 37 Madera County residents that are advocates, and in my mind, we have a need for a much larger number. Nathan might be able to provide the exact number when he comes back up here, but I know we're looking to grow the program. An exciting thing that we're going to do to try to raise our own profile is we're going to have an office here in Madera with 2 staff members who will actually be physically present in the city of Madera. So hopefully that's going to provide us with more of a public presence.
But you can help us too by talking about CASA in the context of a service which deserves the support of the community whenever you have an opportunity to do that. I would encourage you to mention CASA when you're out doing your community meetings. When people ask you about organizations that can make a difference where they might be able to provide some time. And another thing that I would like you to do is to attend some of our functions. We have informational meetings here in Madera on a regular basis. You're all welcome. We can get that information to you if you're interested. Certainly you can visit our website for information about meetings. We have social events occasionally throughout the year. I'd invite you to them. We'd love to have you as our guests. And last but not least, we'd love one of your proclamations. So maybe when we open our office here in Madera, some of you will be able to come to the ribbon cutting and help us celebrate that great event. So thank you very much, and I think now I'm going to turn it over to our advocate, Jane, and she'll tell you a little bit about her personal experience. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jane Couts. I am a retired teacher from here in Madera. And I got involved with CASA shortly after I retired. I had heard about it a couple years before I retired and decided, having seen some children come through my classrooms as the years went by, that really tug at your heartstrings. You know they need help. As a teacher, you can't give them quite the help you would like. So when I heard about CASA, I thought, oh, maybe that's for me. I've been a CASA advocate for about 8 years. I've had 3 cases. 2 of them, the first one, they were the children, it was a sibling group of 3 were adopted, so that was a happy ending. The second one, I had a young man, a teenager, 13 years old. He was reunified with his father. That was a happy ending. And now comes the one that tugs at your heartstrings. My 3rd case I'm currently on. I have been with him for 6 years. He is a 19-year-old non-minor dependent, meaning he can continue with his foster care through Assembly Bill AB 12 legislation. And that was passed a few years ago, allowing extended care to foster children from 19 to 21 if they are full-time employed, full-time students, or a combination of those two. So he chose to stick it out once he turned 18, and he's desperately trying to get his life together, and I'm desperately trying to help him get his life together. He's an orphan. Both of his parents are deceased. They were deceased at quite a young age for him, and there was no other family that wanted to step up and take charge of this young man. He was 13 when I came on his case, and the first thing he asked me when I first met him was, "Are you going to stay with me?" And that kind of alludes to what Nathan said about the constant change in foster children's lives. I didn't know how to answer that. I said yes, and I have so far. He had many placements. I haven't ever even counted them because they were just too many. But the thing that I pushed the hardest for was for him to get a high school diploma. He had 7 high school placements, and he graduated with his diploma at 19 about 3 months ago from an adult school program. So he got his diploma, woo! And I had to follow his credits from his placement in Fresno, Turlock, Sacramento, San Bernardino, back to Fresno. And so that's just one job that a CASA advocate can do, and I kept track of all his credits, so we knew what he had and what he needed so he could graduate. He is now in a very good placement for him. He's taking 1 college class, which is a big step for him. He's part-time employed, and he wants to go to college, but we need to get him ready for that. So I think it's going to be another year or so, but I'm going to stick with him at least till he's 21, and I told him I will stick with him for the rest of his life if he chooses for me to do that. But what fascinates me is the number of children out there that need this. And one reason I come to speak when Nathan asked me to is we need way more than that 37 advocates in Madera, and they need way more in Fresno. Because if this young man had had an advocate when he came into the system at 8 years old, he would have been better off even than he is now. So we do work hard with these kids. We try our best to get done for them what they need, and there are several success stories. And I hope mine is going to be a success story in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Megan Bean. I'm the recruiting specialist at CASA. And as the recruiting specialist, I'm somewhat of the liaison between CASA and the community. So the pitch that Nathan mentioned that I'm going to make to you is if anyone in the room feels inspired by what you've heard tonight and you're interested in becoming an advocate, if you know someone who may be interested in being an advocate, or if you'd like to hear more about CASA, I will be the contact person for that. I do all of the recruiting for our new advocates, and I also do all of our community presentations with the exception of this one. And I'm really trying to build and maintain relationships in Madera County specifically. I've visited a lot of Rotary clubs and Kiwanis organizations and things like that, just to increase awareness about CASA and spread the word. So if anybody in the room tonight knows of a group that might want to hear more about CASA, more in depth from me, or who might want to join our team, I would encourage you to reach out to me. You can find us on our website or on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane and Megan. And I'll just end by saying that number 37 that Jeff shared with you is actually the number of children we're serving in Madera counties in foster care. We have 28 advocates, and that's up from 5 or 10 advocates in the last few years. We've had a very small presence, but things are growing. And we're very excited to provide more advocates. Judge Bender in the court is expecting us to reach the number of 90, serving 90 children within the dependency system. We tend to get the most difficult cases, so the judge will reserve us for that kind of situation. So if there's a lot of change, there's severe abuse, there's no family connections, there's significant school problems, those will be the cases that Judge Bender will assign to us. So I have some handouts I'll leave for the council members. And I can answer questions, but I'm sure our time is just about up. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Mr. Lee, I don't have any questions. It's more of a statement. First of all, thank you so very, very much for
Sure.
making this presentation and bringing awareness. I will say that our past mayor and current supervisor, Mr. Robert Poitras, who I believe is a board member, at least
Board
an
member.
advocate,
Yes.
from this dais has really advocated for CASA. And
Great.
the times that I do see him, somehow, some way, he makes the pitch
He weaves
in there
it in.
for that. He really
Yeah,
does. So
yeah.
I really appreciate what you're doing for our community, and hopefully we can continue to bring awareness.
Good.
And we look forward to having you come back again, of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you, Councilman Oliver, for the invitation.
Nathan, before you leave real quick,
Yes.
do you want to elaborate as to what the average time commitment is for an
Yes.
advocate?
It's generally 10 to 20 hours a month. So people are retired in some cases, like Jane. Other times, they're full-time employed people, and they just manage their time well.
Well, and thank you, Nathan, and your team for coming out, making the presentation. As the mayor had said, we had an opportunity to meet a couple months ago, and it was very eye-opening as to all that you do. It really is God's work, and so I think we should definitely be a partner in that effort to reach 90 advocates or children served,
yes.
and beyond that. So
Yes.
however we can leverage our channels, so to speak, to get the word out there and list participation, I think that we should. So thank you
Good.
again for all that you guys do, and
You bet.
appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Jane, for coming out. Thank you, Megan. Moving on to, I'm sorry, Councilman Hawley.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Of course.
something that makes my heart feel good about our city of Madera, and I just have to share this because it means so much to our community. Yesterday, we had a little boy missing from Parkwood Elementary School, and I have to tell you how he was found. He was found by our street sweeper.
You know, that's amazing that our street sweeper has a camera on it, and what he was doing, patrolling that area, cleaning up the streets, helped PD locate this young man behind the store. And the reason I'm bringing that out because it lets us know what our community is doing. Things that we don't recognize or see all the time are the people who helped found this little boy. He came to school and he left. He jumped over the fence, and somehow the street sweeper was going down that street that morning and got a picture of him and caught him behind one of the stores over there in the shopping center. So I just go out to the city of Madera for what they're doing, beyond our control, beyond our thoughts, and things that we don't even recognize. The boy was back home within a couple hours. So, you know, those are good stories that we like to hear, that nothing tragedy happened to him. And just keep up the good work for our city.
Good point. Thank you very much for that. Glad he was found safe. Moving on, we have a couple of items. First, we have a workshop. And before we get into the workshop, item A1, and before I forget, I'm going to ask the council if it's okay if we can combine A1, the workshop, and then at the end of that, add item E4, which is the schedule of the governance workshop, if we can just kind of combine those. But before we move into that, there's only a handful of items on the consent calendar, and I know we have a lengthy meeting this evening. Would the council be opposed to moving the consent calendar up first? Would that be okay?
Yep.
Then with that, I will ask any council member if they're willing to further discuss or pull any of the consent items presented before us. If not, I will entertain a motion.
So move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that. Now, moving on to the workshop, item A1, workshop with compensation study, or regarding the compensation study. Wendy.
Good evening. The majority of this presentation will come from Mr. Manfredi and Coffin Associates. I'll just call mine a disclaimer on the front end. I did advise the City Council, and I provided a printout of the email. We did receive a request from two of our bargaining units to meet and confer over the compensation study, the parameters of the study. Wages are one of the mandatory subjects of bargaining. They believe that the compensation study, even though limited to management employees, has a potential effect on the wages of their employees. Is it absolutely a meet and confer item? It might be more meet and consult. It might be more gray area. My recommendation would be that tonight council provide feedback to the consultants on what they present to you. That then the consultant, Coffin Associates, and staff will meet with the bargaining units to get their input in a timely manner. And then we'll bring it back to the council if they had any other requests or recommendations on what should be considered.
And is there a difference, or if you can define the difference between meet and confer and meet and consult?
Meet and confer is an absolute go through the process. You might get to impasse. You might have to go through mediation. Meet and consult means we demonstrate that we made a good faith effort to talk about it. But if in the end we need to take action, we take action.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. Any questions of Wendy so far? Thank you very much, Wendy. So at this point, we will continue with the workshop, and I will invite Mr. Ron Manfredi. I need assist.
Okay, and it's just
Just got
the up and down arrows.
the little buttons there. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff, and audience, my name is Ron Manfredi, and I'm working with staff in the City Council and the compensation study firm, Coffin Associates, to discuss the elements and methodology of study. And but before I get into the report to you, I'd first like to extend my appreciation to your staff, who have been super cooperative regarding answering my questions, giving me a load of paperwork to read, and some interviews as well, and the interviews with the City Council. My particular job and contract with the city has several elements, and one of these elements is to look at the parameters of the compensation study to give you the methodology, but also a tutorial for the City Council, in that this is why the report was so long, because I think the council has to have a stronger understanding of how these things work, what's included, and the public needs to understand that we go through a process, a due process, that not by innuendo or accusations, but by step fact-finding, and this is that process. So my role is not to conduct the study. My role is to advise you on the study and to advise and look as a second set of eyes to the consulting group regarding some factors that I think would be important for the overall study, especially regarding the uniqueness of management as opposed to your labor union. Coffin Associates is here this evening, and they will talk about the elements in more detail. And also, I would like to thank the council members personally. I thank you individually. And we had a negative comment this evening, but it was a feedback to you, but about the extended service that you have provided, the city has provided to the community college. You all know my history with our community college, and I've been advocating for this for a long time, and it's certainly appreciated and needed. Thank you. What am I doing wrong? Oh, down. Okay, down. Okay, not up, down. Okay. Now, let's look at because my assignment with the City Council and staff is multifaceted. This is only one aspect of the assignment. I'm also looking at your water rates in relationship to impact development fees and how they affect the water rates or do not impact them. I'm also looking at giving you some advice and direction in your recruitment for the city administrator's position. And we will also conduct a couple of workshops that you're going to decide which evenings you're going to select regarding governance, what the roles of the council are, what the roles of the staff are, and how to intermingle that with presentations to the public. I am not doing the study. The contract specifically says provide written and verbal feedback and recommendations to the City Council during the workshop, which is now, to be held during open session with compensation consultants, cough, and ladies, wave, hired through the RFPs process to evaluate and determine comparable agencies and define the elements of total compensation to be included in the study, including methodology and how each element will be valued for comparison purposes. The goal is to simply come up with a fair and equitable plan that you can afford and to be fair in that process. So in doing so, we have to define the methodology, what elements go into this. And those are categories, and I have to excuse my typist made a couple mistakes here, so I apologize, and that's me. Yeah. It's category, not category. Okay. So I apologize about that. So the first area is comparability. What organizations do we look at? And it's most logical to use other cities in the region, or at least in a reasonable geographic area that are like Madera. So the four elements of that, and COF has started this already regarding a matrix which shows you those who are closest to Madera in several factors. Organizational type and structure, population, pretty easy, staffing, budgets, usually the general fund budget. Also, labor market and location. The labor market means the situation in which are you competing with these organizations for labor. And that sometimes is different for management than it is the rank and file. For example, Fresno may not be too good of a resource to look at regarding your management. It's difficult to look at the situation that has hundreds of employees compared to the city of Madera. But it may be a wise comparability group to look at police officers or wastewater treatment operators. I mention the wastewater treatment because I'm very aware from direct experience and your current experience regarding the difficulty of recruiting those people. And then, of course, this is one that is often skipped and not looked at, but it's very, very important. And this is the tax base, the per capita income, and the cost of housing. Are we talking about the same type of city, or are we talking about much richer cities or cities that are more like Madera? And unfortunately, we rank a little bit low in that area. So that's important. To look at the per capita income of individuals, the tax base, which is usually the sales tax, and the cost of housing sometimes. The next area is one called benchmark classifications. Now, benchmark classifications aren't really important to this group because we're only looking at 14 management classifications. Those 14 management classifications go into just roughly 3 groups. Those who report directly to the city council, you have your city clerk, your attorney, and your city administrator. Those who report to the city administrator directly, and those are department heads. Then you have area managers or department managers, and that constitutes the 14. So you just really have to be concerned about the space between them and what we call the differential. But benchmark classifications are something different. When you're dealing with a larger group like the entire city, a benchmark classification could be sergeant, police sergeant, okay? Because you know that there are positions below police sergeant if you have the corporal position, or if you have officers, of course you do, if you have lieutenants above and commanders. So there's usually an internal difference or differentiation that you want to have before those. It could be 10%, it could be 15. The higher you go up, the larger the differential is between. But an area that also is important is your scope of authority. Okay. Now, in some cities, you have a community development director in which the community development director has a planning, engineering, building inspection, and maybe enforcement. But it may be in some other cities, because the span is so big, that person may be functioning as the next in charge after the city manager. It could be an assistant city manager. But in some other areas, like, for instance, the city of Turlock. Turlock Public Works Department contracts with the city of Ceres and 2 other smaller unincorporated communities for water distribution. Okay, so that's a bigger scope of authority. In this particular city, in Madera, the Public Works Department is, of course, in charge of water, streets, buildings, sewer, drainage. But Parks is actually separated under your Parks and Recreation Director, or and sometimes that's held by Public Works. Also, in your organizational chart, the mechanic equipment operators, not the operators, the mechanics, are in the organizational chart of the Finance Department. Not sure about that one, but that's what your organizational chart says. Now, the scope of authority then it could be different. So the study will look at that scope of authority. Then there's the median and average, or the mean. Median means what falls in the middle. So 11 cities is a good number to have, Madera being the 11th. Okay, so 5 above and 5 below. That's the median. The average, you take all 11 or 10 cities, positions, you add them up, divide by 10 or 11, whatever the number is, and you come up with your average. It's probably a good idea to look at that and know that, but it's not a good idea to necessarily use that, in the sense that one very high cost and one very low cost could throw that off. Now we get to the meat of the problem, or the study area: salary and wage. And now, why did I use different terminology here? Because wage is wage, salary is salary. No. And here's where many in the community have gotten and used the terms inappropriately, or not inappropriately, but incorrectly. And because there's wages, salary, which is your base salary. There's wages, which you could make for some other reason, which I will explain. And then there's fringe benefits. And fringe benefits are difficult to control. You'll see this in my presentation, but you'll see it even more in the study. So salary and range, most municipal organizations have classifications. So a clerk typist is a classification. City clerk's a classification. Police officers are a classification. And you would assign a number to that in the order of alphabetical, maybe. So police officer, theoretically range 50. And that is the scope of the salary that we know that person's going to receive. Not based upon any other factors, just their salary. And you have, within that range, you have what you call steps. Step A, or 1, B, C, D. I believe Madera is A through F, which is 6 steps. Some agencies have 5 steps. Some agencies have 7 steps. A very few of them have 10 or 11 steps, but not as much of a differential between the steps. Madera, the standard is approximately 5%. The salary then is according to how long you've been here. You may start on step A or B, and usually not higher than that. And then when you get to the top of that, you do not get any other salary increases on your range. But there's different ways to get the salary increases. But now we come into a more complex area where you affect wages. And the City of Madera has what you call longevity pay. And frankly, There are a number of areas of compensation that we used 25, 30 years ago. I know this because I was in the role at City of Madera to negotiate these contracts, and we found ways to get a little bit more money in folks' pocket because it was impossible to get wage increases back then for public employees. Those of us who have been involved in that, or those of us who are teachers, know this to be pretty much historical fact. That's not necessarily the case now. When I was the assistant city manager for the City of Madera in 1978, yes, before some of you were born, the full cost of a full medical plan, Blue Cross, Delta Dental, the Lexus of the programs, Vision Service Plan, $10,000 life insurance policy for the family was $87.58. Those are one of those things that stick with you. Now that same cost would be about $2,100 a month. So we have all of this historical information that we've done, and maybe we need to re-look at some of these things and refactor and see what other folks are doing. And it gets more complicated as you look at these, and which we'll explain in the health insurance, but we have to also understand that for every action you take, there could be opposite and equal reaction. So I want to warn you about impacts, that you just don't say, well, that's too much or that's too little. There are impacts. There are contracts to follow, et cetera. We'll talk about that a little bit more. It's not saying there shouldn't be adjustments if you find out there should be, but you have to go through a fair and equitable process. With the longevity pay, we have a situation in which every 5 years, there's a 2.5% increase, up to 20 years and 10%. Now, this is important because this is automatic. And I'm talking with Kaufman Associates about how to show that, because there's maybe a difference of opinion. But if it's automatic and it's universal, I think it should be part of your salary. There's also areas of routine pay, and maybe I shouldn't call that routine, but supplemental pay not included in the classification chart. So again, in the effort to have people certified, to have people who can continue their education, cities, counties, many, many years ago started paying certification pay for and it's most often with police officers in a category called POST. I never can remember exactly what POST stands for, but it's police officers something standards training. Okay, I've used it for 50 years, but but there's there's a number of salary bumps or increases. That's not too much prevalent with your management groups, because your management usually must have a degree, and there aren't these certification pays. Sometimes when a police chief is promoted, then you decide that whether you continue those things. But the other pay and compensation that falls into the wages, I've already mentioned longevity. That could be substantial, up to 10% for 20 years. There's management incentive pay, and the City of Madera has somewhat of a complicated program regarding that, and I would rather not try to answer it how it works, but we have to read the contracts to show that, and it is available, but it also involves losing some leave time. And then one of the most complicated areas, and the area that will be very difficult to study and compare, is your ability to cash out leave time. And the City of Madera has a situation in which you accumulate leave time in a big bucket. So you have, let's say, vacation, you have holidays, you have admin leave, you have sick leave. In most places, you might look at those and say there's different pockets or different buckets. And you take your holidays when you take them. When you take your vacation, you take it. When you take your sick leave, you have to be sick. City of Madera combines these, I think, in an effort to have less time, but the combination, in a way, after seniority, maybe provides a lot of time that people don't find to take off and they cash out. Well, that's reasonable in some cases, but there's also an indication that there's a high cash out rate for certain senior management employees. That has to be looked at. But if another city doesn't have that policy, it's hard to compare. So that's one you'll have to figure out. But I think what we can do is report on it, because we're not studying 85 classifications like we were before. We're only studying 14. That is an area in which we must evaluate. It's probably more of a policy situation than a comparability. Category 4 is health insurance. What the city pays or could pay. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we have a policy here regarding family coverage, and we have a policy regarding single individual coverage if the individual is not married. But the city pays one or the other. So in a particular case, you may be paying out $24,000, $25,000 a year for a family, but for a single employee, you may be only paying out $10,000 because it costs less to cover. So we have to be able to present both of those, and usually we present in a study like this how much it could cost, the highest level it costs the city, but I think it's also, because we're using more classifications here, at least to point out that it could cost less. We also should measure take-home pay. And what I mean by that is you have certain out-of-pocket cost. And unbeknownst to most folks, and maybe even to the council, your management actually has more out-of-pocket cost than your rank-and-file employees. And this is something that is not known very well. I'll discuss this when we talk about the retirement. And I'm not trying to be an advocate for saying don't do anything. I'm trying to be an advocate for the facts. And that's what we have not had the pleasure of knowing recently. With the out-of-pocket cost, let me give you a very simple example. I make $1,000 a month. Wendy makes $900 a month. But out of my salary, I have to pay $200 a month for health insurance. Wendy does not pay anything. Out of my salary, I have to pay $300 a month. Boy, I'm down to like $500. It's not good at all. You'll help me negotiate, won't you, Wendy? You follow my thinking. Who takes home more money? Okay, Wendy by far takes home more money. So this is something that, this picture is very, very hard to present when you're doing a big study. But when you're doing 14 positions, you can make some comparisons and some statements. The next area is retirement. And we all know, who are municipal government watchers in California, that the CalPERS program, a wonderful retirement program, is in jeopardy. We all know the high rates, the soaring rates for public employees, and CalPERS did something recently in 2013 for new people in the system where their benefits are lower, their retirement age is higher, and their personal contributions are higher. So you see on our chart here that we have two categories. You have the sworn, or police officers, and the non-sworn. Then within, the non-sworn are miscellaneous. And all your management people, all of them, all 13, except the police chief, are in the miscellaneous. And that one is less costly. It's costly, but it's less costly because the police officers retire earlier, which makes sense. But we have 3 levels in each one. And we're not going to go into each one of those, but as you can see, the top ones are earlier retirement, greater percentage, and they cost more. And then the next ones are people who are in the system, but who were hired. Is it 212 or 213, Wendy? Not PEPRA, but the other class. 12. Okay. So another typographical error. I apologize. So the second tier ones are 212, not 213, at 3% at 55. And the ones at PEPRA, that means if you came into the system after 2013 and never had belonged to the PERS system. Okay, usually your new officers or your very new employees, but not so much your new managers. And so PERS, and here's where the difference in the management take-home becomes a issue regarding not total cost, but also total take-home. So there's an employer's and an employee's share of your retirement, like there is in most systems. But municipal agencies, when they couldn't give raises, and the PERS was flush with dollars because of the stock market, started paying the employee's share. And it's called employee share, but that wasn't the case with throughout the state. So now the management employees, they pay their full share. It could be 9% for the police chief, it could be 8% for the middle level, and it could be 7%. But your rank and file employees only pay about 1/3 of that, or a little bit higher than 1/3. The figures are in the report. So that has to be considered when you look at total compensation and you look at take home.
you have a question? Well,
Yeah, for
good, because I want to drink some water.
That's about your question, but maybe a clarification, especially for those that may be tuning in and may not understand the various levels as far as PERS. So the 3% of 50, do you want to explain how that 3% or that number 3 is a multiplier?
Yes. Okay. So at 50 years old, you're able to retire at what they call full benefits. You can, let's see, was it Comey or which one? Okay, some FBI guy. You can work a little longer and maybe wake a little bit more, but there's 3 elements. There's the 50, there's the percentage, and there's the number of years. So you're 50 years old. You've worked for 25 years, okay? So you multiply 25 times 3. You're eligible for 75% of your highest level of pay, okay? So, I'm not going to do 2.5 times something. So let's say it's 55. Then you would be, and it was 25 years, okay? So 3 times 25 is 75. You get 75%, but you'd have to wait until you were 55 years old. Okay. And I do speak rather rapidly, so, great to raise your hand or stop me. Miscellaneous is a different formula, a little bit older, and see how the scale goes up as the chart goes down. Now it's 62 as opposed to 60. Okay, I retired at 64 as a city manager. Actually, a new council came on, and I said no. So be careful. Now, also, you have deferred compensation, and again, going back to the Stone Age, I can remember where it came on in Madera about 77 or 76, and they got out of Social Security. Okay, and they weren't even paying for a while into Medicare, but now it's required by law. So there's both sides, whatever it is, 2 point something on each side pay Medicare. So the city does not contribute. The employer nor the employee contributes. So what the city did is provide a deferred compensation program. It's called the 457 in the tax code. In that program, it used to be 5.5%. Somebody's got a little wise and said, hey, this is costing us money, PERS is going up, we're going to reduce it. Your rank and file, except police officers. Why not police officers? Because PERS is more expensive for police officers. So your rank and file, non-management, get 4.2% into the deferred comp program. They can put up to $15,000 if they could find the money to put in there. And it's in the stock market, and you have counselors. ICMA, International City Managers Association, manages it. I used it for years. It's a good way to save money for yourself. You don't play the stock market. You have advisors that help you out. The point, though, is that in this particular situation, management does not have this. The other employees do. Social Security, I mentioned to you already. But the overall, the number 5 is accumulation and payment of leave time. And this is where the city of Madera gets a little bit complicated. This is because you've grouped all your categories of leave time: vacation, management leave, sick leave, holidays, and you've got it in one big barrel. And as you take time off, you earn some more time, and then at the end of the year, if you've declared, you can cash out something. Okay. Now, it's reasonable to cash out a week or so of vacation because the concept was, I would imagine, by the way, this is something I don't think most of us know. This was instituted about 15 or 16 years ago. Okay. And I think what happens is we say, has anything changed in the contracts? We say, no, okay, how much are we going to study this? There's a lot to read. So you have a situation in which, as a staff member stays longer, there's a tremendous accumulation of time. If you don't take this time off, it's by contract your money. Okay, so you want to avoid at the end of a career cashing out $25,000 or $50,000, but you also need to look out if you're cashing out $20,000 or $25,000 a year. You have to really look at that. By the way, most folks aren't, but some folks have, and that's a concern. That's a concern, I think, that brought some of this up to the top for public discussion. But also you have to understand it that you just don't arbitrarily change these things. You have contracts. Certain folks have, traditionally and legally, vacation time is a property right, okay? But sick leave is not. You take sick leave when you're sick. So if you combine it into one barrel, how are you distinguishing that? And so I have some professional concerns about that, and as well as managing it. But we're going to look at those and see how it affects the total compensation, but it's not universal. The area number 8, which the typist messed up again, but it's in my report, is flex time, flex schedules. I think that should be looked at. It's not a monetary thing, but I do think it is a benefit, and I do think that employees use it and like it, and if it works for the organization, it's a nice recruitment tool. So let's see who has flex time and who doesn't. Remember, the purpose of my report is not to make recommendations regarding your salaries at this point. My purpose is to provide you a tutorial on how these studies are conducted, what needs to be looked at, and why some aspects of the Madera study will be complicated. It's to advise you and work with the COF, the consultant firm who will actually do the study. And we already started to work together, found the ladies very, very cooperative and delightful to work for regarding comparable cities, because I had some ideas regarding the wealth of those cities. I think that's one of several measurable tools. And so what you want to do is, before you make any rash decisions, you want to take the information that you have. You want to evaluate the facts, not go on rumors or accusations, and realize that your decisions have consequences, that the total compensation and benefit cost are tied into your ability to pay. Want to have logical, fair, and consistent practices, and understand, and this is something we have in our society that's very difficult with the instant media and things, is that your process is important. One of the areas that you have to understand is that in all management contracts, you have Section 14 in each contract that talks about your ability to make a change in the contract. And you have to have some legal advice on that one. And I think it's problematic for you to make hiring decisions or promotional decisions before you analyze this, and if you are going to make changes, you need to make them at the top. So you have on the agenda this evening, you have your city administrator. By the way, folks, nobody uses that term. Change it, please. City manager, that's the industry term. You don't have to change the authority, just change the title. It's silly. Okay, but one of 50 cities uses that, or 2. Madera's one. So in looking at this, if you're going to do this, if you're going to spend this money with me and with COF, and I'm doing some other things for you regarding water and things of that nature, so not just this, but if you're going to spend this money and you're going to get some guidance, and maybe, not for sure, but maybe you're going to make some changes, then why would you recruit yet for your manager? And then what contract are you going to give him or her? Okay, you have public works opening. You have an acting chief. Great. But the point is that contracts right now, what contract are you going to give them? You'd have to call me back and hire me again to make some suggestions to you, but I shouldn't openly negotiate with you like that. So you need to make a fair and equitable process, and you need to have a strategy at some points if you're going to have anything that you want to implement and change. May I answer any questions?
Ron, thank you very much. Very informative, and I appreciate what you've done so far. I know you've been really working diligently to get us to this point. But I think this is a great starting point. Rather than come out with, in the fourth quarter, we're starting early on in the first quarter with methodology and how we get from point A to point B. So I really, really appreciate what you've done so far and so far where we are with this workshop. Any questions of Mr. Manfredi so far? Certainly be open to others as we move along.
Yes, and I realize I went through that pretty rapidly, but the better part of the presentation is going to follow. I'm available, and I've been working closely with Wendy to understand the contracts, and now I'll be working with COF. Right.
Well, as you said, it is a process, and studying the facts certainly is a great place to start. Councilman Oliver has a question.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate the presentation. I thought it was a good, comprehensive look, and I think this question would be both for yourself as well as COF. Given the attention to the PERS crisis and anticipated struggles with that, do you think it would be prudent to look at, in our comparative analysis for each classification, what the average unfunded liability is for each classification? Is that too much apples and oranges?
No, I think you could. Here's the problem with that. The unfunded liability is not the problem or the cause by the employee. In other words, the employee. So I think you need to. I would show it, but I would footnote it. Okay. Last time I don't think it was shown. Okay, and so the problem is on one side of the coin. You know, it depends if you're the employee or the organization. Yeah. Okay, on one side of the coin, the employer is paying it. Yeah. That's a cost to the employer. On the other side of the coin, the employee is not the reason for the unfunded liability. It was somebody before. Unfunded liability, there are several factors in the retirement PERS program. Okay, and one of them is what program you have. Do you have the fattest one or the best one, which is more expensive, or do you have the second tier or the third tier? So that's one aspect. Another aspect is, do you have single highest year analysis or third highest year? Another factor is, do you have sick leave conversion? These are all terms that we understand in the industry. So unfunded liability is a cost. Mm-hmm. But wait a minute. Just because my city has it and the other person doesn't, then you're showing me make money. So I would show it and I would comment on it, and then I would actually, we talked about showing both aspects of it. So I think they came up with a better solution than I had. Because my thing was, you just show it, you know. But theirs was that, no, I'll show both of them. So it gives you, because you see, maybe you have an unfunded liability in PD, but you don't have it in miscellaneous. Okay, so again, unfunded liability is for the cost of things that PERS came back and said, oh, by the way, we weren't charging you enough. I went heads up with PERS on this I don't know, 15 years ago and won, but it's not easy to win when you go against PERS.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I thought maybe for just frame of reference and comparing ourselves to other cities, where do we stand in that extent? I obviously know that it's not.
Again, I'm not trying to advocate. I'm just trying to point out certain things. Your management personnel pays their PERS, okay, and then they pay a little bit else on something else. But then on the other hand, they get a little bit of management incentive pay, but they give up leave time. So the process is too complicated. Okay, that doesn't necessarily change wages and things, but it could prevent high cash outs on certain times. And again, that's not universal, but it has happened, and obviously it caused some reflection and concern from the public eye, and then yours as well.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor Freddy. Appreciate it, and I'm sure if there's other questions that come up, you'll be nearby.
Yes, and for me, that was short.
Yes, I know. We have with us representing Coffin Associates, Ms. Kaneko, and Ms. Mercer, who will now be giving their presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and to the council. Thank you for having me here this evening. It's a good opportunity to learn about our process and ensure that we have good direction on providing you meaningful data to make decisions in the future. My name is Katie Kaneko. I'm the president of Coffin Associates, as well as I'll be the project director on this total compensation study. And I'll just briefly tell you about our firm. We were established in 1984. We started in the water wastewater niche and have since expanded to serve just about every public agency throughout the state of California. Type of public agency. We haven't hit every public agency yet. So cities, counties, and the whole array of special districts. About 70% of our work is classification and compensation work, so we are safe to say we've done hundreds of these studies, and we use a methodology that provides us good, solid, consistent data to make decisions, but is also flexible enough to address the unique attributes of each of our clients as well. And so to get direction, again, on the information that will be useful to Madera is part of the process here today.
One of the aspects of our study that we feel is unique is that it is a transparent process and it's very inclusive, and we usually build into the process multiple touch points with various stakeholders to ensure that we have the best data possible. Part of that is the determination of the compensation survey elements, which is, I think, what the agenda or part of the agenda is this evening, is to help decide upon those elements. We also have built in, once we collect the data, we are like to be very transparent in providing that data to the employees to review, make sure that they're comfortable, answer any questions, and then provide a narrative report that discusses our process and findings and recommendations, and can provide different options on implementation. So organizations generally perform compensation studies fairly regularly, just to establish a fair and competitive system of pay, and to recognize the scope and different complexities of the work being performed. The goal of every public sector organization that we work with is to attract good quality employees and to keep them. And so to do that, you have to take a two-pronged approach. One is to say, what is our labor market paying, and how do we compare to that? And then to reflect internally to say, you know, what is important to Madera? What are some of the internal considerations that we need to make based on our state to be competitive in that labor market? So there's the internal and the external equity that needs to be considered. And the bottom line is it should be transparent and very justifiable and sound, considering, you know, fiscal as well as using good data. I talked about the external-internal equity, and Ron pointed out in his presentation that there are some unique attributes into the benefit components of the City of Madera. And so while we're gathering this data, we also need to take into consideration the impact of other classifications, since we're only surveying this one segment of Madera's classifications, being management. I'm going to quickly run through our methodology. We kick off every study with this discussion of what should the survey elements be. And there are three variables that go into every study, and that is the comparator agencies that are surveyed, that are considered to be your labor market, the benchmarks, which was part of the contract, so there's not too much decision being made. They were already determined to be the management group. And then, of course, the benefits data that we're going to be collecting. So before we can begin our data collection process, those three variables need to be determined. Once that occurs, it takes about 8 weeks to go through to all of the agencies. We usually recommend 10 to 12 agencies. We worked with the city a few years ago, and in that study, we actually chose 10. The reason that we do want to have a large group of agencies, 10 to 12, is that we want to make sure that we get enough matches to represent the market data. We have to have at least 4 matches to provide you any sort of statistical analysis. Once we collect the data, we present it in the form of data spreadsheets. So there's going to be a spreadsheet that summarizes the top monthly or base salary information. There will be one that gives you a side-by-side comparison of the benefits. What we capture is the amount that the employer is paying on behalf of the employee, typically. And then we provide a summary of the total compensation, which is base pay plus benefits. And we will provide you the match, the actual classification within each of the comparator agencies that matches Madera's, the dollar figures quantified in monthly dollars. And so you'll get a good picture of the side-by-side comparison of all of these components of total compensation. Again, that'll go back through the organization for review and question, and we feel comfortable with that. We'll make recommendations based on some sort of market reference. Most organizations tend to target market median, But there are always exceptions to that depending on the organization's situation and where they feel that they fall relative to the market. So we would provide, different scenarios and recommendations on salary placement. Let's see. Let me move into the next slide here. So to kick off the discussion on the comparator agencies, we usually go through this process where we objectively look at certain criteria that we feel is important to evaluate and try to find those agencies that have the most similar profile to Madera. That starts with the type of agencies and the services that are provided. Because you are a city and there's usually an array of services that are common to cities, we would target other cities within your geographic region, because that's usually who you're recruiting from or maybe recruiting from you, so you want to stay competitive with that group. And we know that you have some unique services that not every city would have, like police and the water, wastewater. So we also targeted a group of other cities that provided similar services. Ron had already mentioned we're going to be looking at the number of full-time equivalents. We're going to be looking at population. We're going to be looking at general fund budgeted expenditures, and we break that down to a per capita ratio or per resident, per 1,000 residents. And then we looked at sales tax revenue, which was a suggestion by Ron to kind of measure a normal tax base, and one that would be a variation from city to city. We would also look at cost of living, just to get a similar value, and that measures any consumable goods, which includes housing. So we went through and we picked a larger group of cities. We picked 19 altogether, and I'll show you kind of the ranking process that we go through. So each of these criteria that I identified, we conduct an absolute value ranking within that category to say, okay, geographic proximity, let's rank the nearest cities to the furthest cities in a numerical way using an absolute value formula. It's part of Excel package. So you can see the rankings on geographic proximity and so on, population, full-time equivalents, expenditure capita, sales tax revenue capita, etc. And then what we do is we do a sum score of all of these different criteria per potential comparator city, and then we rank that overall comparison score. So what that is providing you is just data to tell you, here's a group of cities, and this is how they rank to Madera, with the lowest score being most similar to Madera. So going back, you can see what I highlighted in green here is the 12 cities that we found to be most similar. And what we're going to need to determine is what cities are the best group. We can choose anywhere from 10 to 12, and I think we will still have sufficient data on the benchmarks. Now, this is just this very objective criteria score. I've been doing this long enough to know that there's other criteria that sometimes need to override this objective scoring process. For instance, if there's another city out there that's not on this list or wasn't in this top 12 that you're constantly losing employees to, I would say that might be a consideration to override some of this market data. So this is probably the first point that we would want to have some sort of discussion on, and I'm happy to answer any questions about this process.
I do regarding the city of Fresno. You wanted to select at least 4 out of the 6 categories. If we can go back to that slide before this one. And this is just kind of my outside look, so I don't have any professional data to back it up. But as I look at expenditure per capita and then the cost of living index, just kind of on the forefront, that seems very close to Madera. Mm-hmm. And as we compare the 5th largest city in California to Madera, and I think that might have been a question that some had the last time we did the study, is how do we compare ourselves to Fresno when there's just so much of a difference as far as cost of living, sales tax, expenditures, revenues. So can you maybe explain the methodology to get those scores?
Sure. Well, in fact, with Fresno, you can see it ranked 4 out of the 19
right.
Comparator agencies in cost of living. So it actually has a very similar cost of living, and this is ranked according to the national average. So in that category, they compare quite well, actually, as well as expenditure per capita, because again, this is based on the budgeted expenditure items per population. So they have a larger budget, but they have a larger population that they're serving as well.
Right.
So they actually compared very closely in that category. Where they didn't is population and full-time equivalents, because they're a much larger city.
Sure.
And Ron touched on this also to say that in management, it is difficult with a really large city and a smaller city to draw direct comparisons. Now, we'll often look at maybe a lower level manager, or taking the average of the person with the ultimate responsibility, say over police, and maybe a lower level to better balance out the scope of responsibility, knowing that they still have the ultimate authority for that service, but certainly don't have the hundreds of employees that might be the situation here.
Thank you for that. I guess maybe just, again, without any data whatsoever from the outside looking in, I thought those numbers might have been a little bit higher, but that was kind of to my point, in that being data-driven,
right,
that kind of could change what our assumptions may be.
Exactly. It doesn't go with our instincts, but this is based on the numbers for each of these agencies.
Got it. There's another question by Councilman Oliver, if you don't mind.
With respect to the city of Fresno, would you look at, see how I could phrase this, the type of management structure? So I know with the city of Fresno, it being a charter city, mayor's office essentially administering that city, looking at the city manager position, although there's a lot of similarities, there's also a communications director and a senior advisor to the mayor, and a lot of other people in different positions that kind of work within the similar, skill set, so to speak, that you might find a jack of all trades of a city manager in Merced or Topeka or Madera. So can you maybe touch on that, if that makes sense?
I know from having done so many of these, there's never going to be a city just like Madera. So what we're trying to do is find the group that is most similar, and to your point, there's going to be different organization structures, even with the services provided by each department head. That could look different from city to city. What we try to do is ensure that the match is at least 70% similar. And Fresno needs a communications manager because it's so much larger, and one person couldn't handle it all. But when I look at the level of responsibility and the scope of duties that fall under that city managers, we might find that yes, there'll be some differences, but it's probably 70% similar.
I think that's what I was looking for, and that's how I would have rephrased my question. So thank you.
Right.
Great. Another question by Councilwoman Gallegos.
Personally, I would feel, I don't know if my colleagues would feel, I'd like Fresno thrown out and not be part of this survey.
Mm-hmm. So that would be the factor. Are there overriding considerations?
There are 750,000 in population. We're 65,000.
Right.
And you're saying that the manager's position is kind of the same as our city manager position, but like Councilman Oliver said, there's other people that take a lot of the duty off that position that I don't think it's comparable to the city of Madera.
Right. And there are going to be differences, obviously, when you're like I said, in management, when you're working with such a large city. We would do our best to evaluate the structure. It may mean that the match would be the average salary of the assistant city manager and the city manager. I mean, I'm not sure until we get in there what the match would be. But I understand the population ranked very low. You can see the 20 score. They were at the very bottom because they're so much larger. But when you look at other factors, they're close. I don't know whether you're recruiting from Fresno, they're recruiting from you, if it's important to be competitive from that standpoint. I don't know. Expenditure per capita is very much in line. So whatever they budgeted, they're spending about the same dollars per resident as Madera is. So in that respect, they're somewhat similar. So these are just all things to consider in the pool, and that's why they ranked, 7 out of the 19 other
Right,
comparator
and our
agencies.
residents have spoken too that they were not real happy to see Fresno on the comparison in 2014 when your firm did the compensation study then. So that's another reason I bring it to attention. Just like our parks director is not the same as their parks director, they have many more parks than we do. So looking at that aspect too, if you go back into the study and you look, the comparisons were not, they shouldn't even have been compared in 2014 when they were. So that's why I'm just saying, as just reference of in the past and residents' concerns and then the way they've spoken, that I feel that Fresno should be eliminated from this list.
I will just point out one other thing. So there's usually 10 to 12 agencies, of which each comparator represents one data point. So it isn't focusing on any one comparator, but just kind of the group that you really feel should be considered as part of your labor market. And the inclusion or exclusion of one isn't going to make a huge amount of difference in the data because, again, it's focusing on the median where most agencies are clustered of a larger pool of agencies. So,
Councilman Oliver.
I think Councilwoman Gallegos has made some excellent points. I think my next question, I don't want to belabor this thing and keep going on, but looking through this list, I'm not a wonk when it comes to city governance and who does what, but at least what pops out to me, the city of Fresno might be the only mayor, council form of government on this list. Would you say that's correct? Most others are council manager.
I did not necessarily look at that aspect of it.
For me, that might be a criteria. I'd like to see maybe apples to apples as far as that form of governance.
Good point. I agree. And Councilwoman Gallegos, I agree. I think, well, Katie, there's not going to be an exact match to the city of Madera. Right. I think for me personally, as we do roles and responsibilities is kind of more what I'm looking for. Where here in the city of Madera, we may have one particular position, for instance, that really takes on, other cities may have 3 people doing that very same role. And so that, I think, would skew possibly the compensation. So for that reason, as we look at as a different form of government and the number of employees that Fresno has and their roles and responsibilities, I think that would be a tough comparison. I agree. But anyway, I think we can move on. I think it's duly noted, and we'll continue with the workshop.
Okay. Just for informational purposes, again, because these have already been determined, but these are the 15 benchmarks. I think the executive director successor agency was also added to the group. What is important as we embark upon this survey is to recognize that we're not surveying the individuals who are within the classification. What we're focusing on is the potential benefit package that somebody would receive being hired into that role just by sheer employment. So there's no other conditions attached. Because whether you're married or single or cash out all your leave or don't, that impacts your take-home pay, but it means you didn't take the time off when everybody else did, and so it's kind of a trade-off in benefits. What we typically look at in creating our demographic profile is an employee plus family who's been with an agency for 5 years, and we typically survey the classic tier. So that's the benefit tier. It's usually where most employees fall still because, there's still long-term employees. But it would more importantly be the tier that anybody hired in to the city of Madera who was part of the PERS system would fall. So it's an important piece to look at for recruitment and retention purposes. This profile can be customized to be a more meaningful profile to the city of Madera. For instance, if most of your management team has been with Madera at least 10 years, we might want to look at that point in benefits. So that would be another decision that we would need to make in determining these survey elements. Any questions on the profiles or comments? Then we moving into the benefit data, and Ron spent a good amount of time trying to highlight all the different variances that could occur in here. We typically survey these three elements and find that they comprise the bulk of the total compensation package that most management receive, and that's retirement, insurances, and leave. I mentioned what we do is we pick up the cost to the employer for these benefits. So when we're looking at retirement, we're going to be looking at the formula that each agency pays, and there's going to be two different scenarios we're going to provide here. Typically, again, referring back to the conversation that you just had with Ron, typically there is a value to the employee for these benefits that's going to be similar under the same formula. But because of unfunded liabilities and maybe different demographics, the cost to the employer can vary tremendously for the same benefit. When we survey, we usually record retirement using a statewide average cost for that benefit, and that's using data from PERS, and they'll give us a range, and we choose the middle of that range, and we cost everybody with the same benefit formula the same. Because what we're trying to look at is, what's the relative value of that benefit package? That being said, it can't be ignored, the soaring costs and the differences in the cost to the employer for the benefit package. I just finished a study in the same region where everybody had the same, there were three agencies that had the same benefit. One was paying 20%, one was paying 40%, one was paying 60%. So that's how great of a variation there is. So I think it's really important for decision making to look at those two perspectives, and we'll be providing you data spreadsheets that will highlight them both. Again, we usually survey the classic tier. We don't survey PEPREAP because not as many employees fall in that, and it's the same benefit all the way across, so there's not the same variation. We'll pick up any information if the agencies participates in Social Security or there's another sort of deferred compensation package. We'll pick up the cost to the employer on this. We do this in monthly dollars. This is where the employee plus family piece comes into play in our profile. We'll pick up the amount that the employer pays for insurances for medical, dental, vision, long-term, short-term disability for an employee plus family. So the maximum that they'll pay. Sometimes there's more than one option. We also look at the leaves, so what an employee would receive in holidays, vacation, and administrative or personal leave. And if there's any other benefit that an employee received just by being hired into that classification, we'll also record the cost of that. So sometimes that's auto allowance or a cell phone allowance. Now, there's a whole lot of other variations in the benefit components. The way we typically handle this is that we do policy comparison summaries. So on educational incentives, that's usually more for individual contributors, but sometimes there may be for management. We would just simply show the differences in the policies between the agencies. Longevity programs, if an agency has them, there will be a whole variation about when they kick in. So we would summarize the different longevity programs that exist within each of the agencies. We'll look at medical cost sharing. We'll look at some of the cash out-of-pocket issues that Ron had talked about with some employees having to pay per, some employees having to contribute more to medical. So we'll summarize all of that information to you. So this is the whole range, just based on reviewing Ron's report and some of the interest of the city, that we would capture benefits data on. And then we can certainly provide scenarios. I'm using kind of a straw person to exemplify what this looks like in pay. So our goal is to drill down a little bit in this area so you have some information to make decisions on. So then once the variables are determined, the comparators and the benefits data, then we're going to go out. It takes about 8 weeks to to collect the data. We spend a lot of time looking at the class descriptions. We look at organizational structures. We look at MOUs. We follow up with HR and ask further questions on actual costs and clarification on some of the policies. So there's a lot of time spent gathering good, consistent data for this study. We talked about on the data spreadsheets, we'll provide to you the median and the average for each of the benchmark positions, each of the surveyed positions. We'll provide you the median and then the percentage that Madera is above or below that median, and then the average and the same percentage that above or below. Ron had mentioned this. My experience is most agencies target the median. The average does get skewed by very, very high and very, very low salaries, where the median tends to just focus on where most agencies are clustered. So we feel like that's a good, reliable data point. And then from there, you can determine your compensation philosophy. Is the median where you want to be? Should it be a percentage above or below the median? There are other decisions that need to be made around that data. One of the things to think about is, the strategy about positioning to the market, and where should the city of Madera be with this comparator group. And that all comes into play by reviewing the current structure, considering your recruitment and retention issues. Has there been difficulty in recruiting? Consider performance management. Some agencies like to put some sort of incentive plan in play. Other alternative compensation models. And then, or as I talked about, the median or different percentile to the market. In some cases, we are not able to get 4 matches per benchmark. There's a little uncertainty about the city attorney position because there's a lot of cities that contract out that position, so I'm not sure if we'll find that there are 4 employees within the comparator group. And in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to anchor it to a benchmark that we have market data on. And in the case of the city attorney, it would probably be the city manager, and make some sort of recommendation on internal alignment. And then, of course, it was mentioned several times, because we're only doing a small group of the total employee group for Madera, we're going to need to look at any decisions that are made, what the impact would be to other classifications. So in creating the compensation structure, usually what we do with that market data is the organization's going to decide compensation philosophy. We're going to look at internal and external equity issues, design a compensation structure. That would include a range structure and then any sort of placement of the classifications within that range structure. And then, of course, the city would go through the process of looking at each individual. We usually just provide market data, and then the individuals will be calculated based on where they fall within the range and other personal benefit factors. And then, of course, that schedule needs to be maintained and administered, and periodically other surveys need to occur. In the meantime, just getting a gauge of your labor market and what kinds of cost of living adjustments might be being made. And that's essentially our process, the way we approach it, and certainly open to any questions or direction.
Absolutely, Katie. Thank you so very much. Very informative, and thank you for giving us your methodology and how we get from point A to point B. It is a process. As Ron had said, this is going to be a long-term process. But thank you very much for that information. Councilman Hawley has a question.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I was just listening to all this, and I was listening to what our Councilwoman Gallegos said, is it any kind of way that when we look at this study that you can get the same kind of population that we have and see what they have as city managers, polices, and all that kind of, in the same range of what Madera has for
Right.
each department head? Because I know when we start looking at that study of all the other cities, And as they stated, some of them have a $500,000, so they have all these other agencies in there besides the city manager, assistants, and so on. And then we look at attorneys, they have assistant attorneys and so on. So I would like to see something that might help us that has the same population that Madera has and has the same kind of workforces that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would bring me closer to understanding what we're trying to find. Because if we go out and bring all these other big cities in there, they have so many other different working departments that we don't have, but they're still in that same medium of pay.
And I understand your point. That the challenge in that is the geographic region. There's only so many cities, and there's only so many cities that are the size of Madera. Mm-hmm. So we actually reached out a little bit to more surrounding areas and picked up, the city of Lodi. We looked at Manteca. We looked at
Even
the other one that was Los Banos and those agencies that and Galt was in there also, because they are more of a similar population size. Mm-hmm. But, of course, they're not in your geographic region either. And some of them made it into play. We could start going statewide, and then you're really kind of outside of the region of this study. So, that's certainly possible. The other factor we have to look at also is the cost of living. So to find 10 to 12 cities that are similar in population as well as cost of living is a further challenge.
Okay.
So it's taking a blend of all of those different criteria and trying to find the best mix.
Councilwoman Gallegos.
Can I see the slide before this one, please?
Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you. And the question I had, I don't know if I missed it. Do we have a timeline here that says how long from the time that we start to the time that we'll get that information as a council?
For the final study. So it takes about 8 weeks to collect the data. So we can't begin collection until we know the comparator agencies and the data that we're going to be collecting. So it's more working backwards. I don't know if you have a date that you would like to receive the data, and then you would add 8 weeks to that and then go from there.
So you're looking at data finishing around May 16th?
If we were to start tomorrow and have this determined, yes.
And so when you get ready to go out for the cities that you're going to look at, are we as council going to get reference of who you're going to be studying before you go out and pick those cities? Or are these the cities that we've already picked?
These are it right here that they're suggesting.
These are the ones that ranked closest to the city of Madera.
Because in the RFP, I think I read that you were going to ask council for suggestions on some cities that they would also want to see in the study if they weren't listed before. Is that?
And that is, we definitely can take input on that. We looked at the information that Ron had provided. We looked at this agencies that we'd surveyed in the past and the agencies that we had looked at in the past, and that's what comprised this 19-city list. I think I worked on this study back in 2008, and I know a concern of council at that time was cost of living, so we ended up looking at cities all across the state, but there were Southern California cities in there, and it's a different region. Again, if we're trying to ensure competitiveness and that we're paying fairly for our region, there are some challenges with reaching too far out there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Councilman Rigby.
One thing that I hope this does, and Mr. Manfredi, I appreciate it, and Ms. Canico, I appreciate the presentation. I just wish that all the torches and pitchforks that were here 4 months ago were in the room to understand and realize the complexity behind compensation studies.
It is.
And the amount of work it takes, and it's not apples to apples anywhere.
Right.
And your organization is trying to do the best job it can to narrow down the best possible comparison.
Right.
I think
nobody's
Mr. Manfredi used the word unique in his report to us, over and over again. Madera is unique. Madera is unique. This is a unique situation. And so that makes it even more difficult on top of all of that. I think to speak to Councilwoman's concerns about Fresno, as well as my other colleagues, I wasn't here at the time of the first compensation study that you guys were a part of. I came in kind of at the end of it after it was decided. But if I can recall, Fresno was included because at that time, recruitment and retention was a big deal to that council. And if my memory serves me correctly, the last few people that we've lost from the city, be it from code enforcement, from Parks and Recreation, they've gone to Fresno. And so if we're losing employees, there's a competitor out there, it might be worth just knowing what it is that the competitor is offering, because that's where the people are going and leaving. And so if retention and recruitment is of value to this council, I might be lenient towards including Fresno in several of the cities that are being included. But I understand where the councilman's coming from, as well as Councilman Hawley, that a different form of government makes it that much more difficult to kind of, again, compare similar duties and or resources, what have you. But there's always going to be that margin of error kind of wherever we're looking. Right. If the cities are the biggest deal to our council members, then I would be open to hear their suggestions moving forward before we dismiss the.
I think a lot of we lose our employees to Fresno because they have more to offer than we do in Madera. Restaurants, business, and we are not just losing to Fresno. We've lost to Chowchilla, we've lost to Turlock, Merced, that are on here also. It's not just Fresno that we've lost some high-ranking employees from Madera.
Right, and so all the more reason to possibly include it. I'm amendable to anything, but I don't know if because Fresno has a Chili's and Madera doesn't, that I'm ready to kind of just toss them out.
Well, I think again, this kind of goes back to these underlying factors. For instance, how many employees are living in Fresno and working in Fresno, living in Fresno, working in Madera, and vice versa. And so that really extends the data. That are we losing them to a job, but they're still living here in Madera? In which case, how does cost of living become a factor if you're living here but working in Fresno, or again, vice versa? I don't think, as you had said, that it's going to really change the numbers a whole lot. But I agree with those reasons, in that because it's just such a different form of government, the roles and responsibilities are so different, and the number of employees, which is really kind of bringing me around to one of my concerns, is that we're not really talking a whole lot about duties and responsibilities. I think it's more positions. And so to be fair with the staff that we have here in the city of Madera and the hats that they wear, and I'm sure in other cities as well, where we might, again, have one particular person doing a number of responsibilities, in that somebody, whether it be Fresno or Chowchilla, has one responsibility. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's just so many underlying factors. So maybe having the information, not necessarily saying that that's gospel and we have to go with it. I really want to make sure, as close as we can, that we are doing a study that reflects with what we're asking our employees to do when we say this is what the job offers, but this is what it entails. And I have not really heard a whole lot about that tonight. I've really just kind of heard positions.
Right. I mean, where we can pick up on that to the extent possible is just the reliance of the descriptions within each agency themselves and conversations that we can have with human resources. But the descriptions usually say the purview and scope of responsibility of that position and what functional service areas they oversee, and who they're supervising, who reports to them, all of that kind of detail, so that we can holistically look at the profile and say, okay, it's not exactly like Madera, but it's at least 70% similar.
Okay. And as we move forward, obviously it's going to take a long time to gather this data. In that 8 weeks, are we kind of apprised of how the process is going, or are we just come back in 8 weeks and say, here it is?
Whatever your preference is.
Okay.
we're happy.
Okay.
We usually stay in touch and check in with our contact within the city and
Through,
let them
I
know
mean-
how things are coming along. Sometimes we may have difficulty getting data from agencies, and so there's this
Sure.
whole,
Sure.
do you know anybody there? And
Right, it's a
yeah.
process, but,
Yeah.
I mean, if at the least, maybe through HR, kind of next steps, it's just a suggestion. Councilman Oliver has a question.
I can see Mr. Manfredi from my site right here. I think he has another comment, or maybe.
I'm sorry.
My last question or comment, you mentioned maybe even looking at years of service as far as a particular management group or classification. How have you approached that in the past? I mean, would we drill down to a level of detail where we might look at that bench of management across each city and take that average for comparative purposes, since we're not making it about the individual
Right.
person, but about the position? So is that something that's...
Well, the 5-year employee versus a 10-year employee, as an example, they're at 10 years, there may be a longevity
Got it.
pay that kicks in.
Maybe more in the
And
summary.
maybe there'd be more vacation, or maybe there'd be, so it would just record those differences. It wouldn't look at what each individual has, but we would use that profile to survey across the board.
Okay, that makes sense. So probably more in the summary, too, of those benefits, so to speak, or that you mentioned.
Right. We can, when we do the policy summaries on longevity or vacation, sick, all of that, we
Would
would.
it hurt to include, I don't know if it's even possible, if we looked at the group of classifications as a whole for each city and took the average years of employment for that agency?
We can try. It's, I guess to appreciate that all of these agencies are really, really busy. And ever since the recession, a lot of this, the descriptions and the salary schedules and the MOUs are usually placed online, and we usually have to have conversations to go back and forth. It would take a little bit of an effort for HR to go and find out the profile for each individual and do that report. Sometimes it's even hard to get auto allowances provided. So we could certainly ask. It's just, it may slow down the study, because that's usually an extra step for HR, who you can imagine probably get lots of calls along this line.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well,
but we could certainly attempt.
I think it's a great idea, to tell you the truth. I mean, again, we can't have an exact comparison, but I think for our purposes in the city of Madera, I think that would be something worth
exploring
and
see if we can get that
top
data.
5 or,
Yeah. Sure.
The last thing I want to do is slow down our search for our city manager. And if this is going to play into that contract negotiation, then I want to make sure that we're careful about our timeline. Again, I'm still amenable to other cities that council members might be interested in having researched if they have yet to be made available, because I think we need to kind of move forward.
There any on this that aren't on this list?
Right. That's kind of what. Yeah. That's kind of what.
That would be.
None that came to mind. The only one that I had questioned early on was the city of Fresno, and I know it's our neighbor to the south, and so they're going to score close on a couple of things, but.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ron. You're right behind that monitor. I didn't even know you were there. I thought you left. I thought she went home.
Fantastic presentation, and the slides were so much better than mine.
I did.
It's complicated, but let's not make it more complicated than it is.
Right. Agreed.
Okay. Let's try to respond to some of the questions and concerns. First of all, sure, get a progress report, but don't get involved in the study.
No.
Do not get involved. Do not say, well, our finance director is really a cute guy, so I think we ought to get a little bit more money. And it's true. The point is this. 10 cities is fine. 12 cities may be better. If you're uncomfortable with Fresno, then take off Chowchilla too, okay? Because the discrepancies are equal.
Yeah.
I have a few problems with Fresno's good because they're there, okay? On the other hand, maybe for police officers and wastewater treatment plant operators or entry-level positions, it's comparable. For management, I'm sorry. But it may have it may be good information to have.
Yeah.
Now, unlike your situation with your labor groups, you may have had in a labor agreement that you were going to reach the median. You may have had an implementation agreement. You have no such agreement. You want to be fair, okay? And frankly, you hear the community comments about Fresno, but that's not what your decision should be made on. Your decision should be made on, is it a good comparability, okay? And I could argue, depends what position I'm in, either point. But if you're uncomfortable with it and you want to remove it, then by God, remove Chicilla too, because you want to be fair and balanced,
That's right.
okay? You still have 10, 11 with Madera. Okay, so you have 11 rather than 13. Big deal. To respond to Mr. Hawley's question, the majority are very close to Madera. In distance, most of them, and in population. Merced, Tulare, Porterville, Turlock, Delano, a little bit smaller, Hanford, Lodi, Galt, a little bit smaller, but still. So you have plenty of agencies, just exactly as you wanted, Donald. So you have 7 or 8 agencies that are very close, okay? And then when you see all the information, you could say, well, I want to be more like the middle of them. You're not obliged to the median or the average or anything, but it's good to have a little bit more information. However, what I've asked COF to do, and they seem to be very open to it, is give a little bit more on the footnote or explanation of benefits, of leave time, etc. Because when you're dealing with 85 classifications, you just give a bunch of footnotes at the end. But frankly, your leave time policy, which is hard to compare, but is also a policy consideration, you want to have a little bit more information. Okay? And that means that they'll look at the contracts. So we're not trying to be an advocate of changing anything, but we are trying to be an advocate of exploring and informing yourselves, because I tell you, that part of your stuff is, if I have to read a contract 3 times, it's too complicated.
It's complicated.
Too complicated.
Councilman Robinson has a question.
Yes. Yeah, in the past, our former city manager, he confided to me that during the Great Recession, a lot of the directors, they had to, wear double, their workload was increased.
Probably.
Yeah, and, they had to wear 2 hats, like for instance, David Randell, he had to oversee the airport and public works. So, do you make amends to that also?
I think that we can both answer that. That there's where the scope of responsibility comes in. Yeah. So in other words, the scope of responsibility says that in your department, as the public works director or chief, what are the areas that you have responsibility for? What are the number of employees? For example, they don't do them too much anymore because they couldn't get along, but you had some public safety directors back in the 80s and early 90s. And that public safety director was usually the chief who was also in charge of fire. Didn't work, didn't it? Okay, we're in good shape there. We've contracted out to CAL FIRE, and it's great. So that's the scope of responsibility, Councilmember Robinson. So yes, they will be looking at that, and they have, because of their experience, they know what questions to ask. It's the same way when I look at a budget. I can look at that budget very quickly and say, this is not right. That's wrong. Pop the hood on a car. Not so good. Not so good. So I think you're right, but it's in there.
All right.
But so if you're uncomfortable with the Fresno situation, and by the way, I can make a stronger argument for your rank and file position, because the positions you were talking about were a lot of times officers and firefighters. You don't have the firefighter situation anymore because CAL FIRE is the best you can get. So Holly, Councilmember Holly, you have plenty of cities that are very similar to Madera. Merced's a little bigger, Hanford's a little smaller. But they're valley cities. They're very comparable to you.
I think with where we are, Mr. Manfredi, I think it, as you had mentioned, I think it's good information to have, except for possibly the suggestion by Councilman Oliver that we might need to, again, without extending the process, because 8 weeks, takes us into May, and there's a lot of things hanging in the balance for this council to make decisions on. So the last thing we want to do is...
One thing that you can measure, though, is that I think that if you're working for a 5-council, that you ought to get, as opposed to a 7, the person's working with a 7 ought to get $10,000 more a year.
Thank you.
That's just
Thank you. Yep.
Maybe 15.
Keep talking.
If you want to be comfortable with
Keep
it.
talking,
if you
yeah.
Throw out Fresno, then throw out Chowchilla too.
Yep.
I just feel like we're paying COF way too much money not to have the opportunity to get that information.
Well, I think, again, that was my suggestion, is to leave it in as is for information purposes, and with the addition of Councilman Oliver's suggestion. If there is another council member that wants to make another suggestion or amendment or addendum to where we're going, I would really, really like to get Coffin Associates working on this immediately. We're good? We're good with that? Anything else?
So just to clarify, are you saying I'm moving forward with these?
With those suggestions?
12 agencies? Okay.
Yes. That would be my recommendation. Again, we will have that information, and I think as we start to make decisions, we'll certainly take that information into account.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. For sure.
Sorry, just a caveat. I do have to respond to the request from the bargaining units that I did receive to meet and confer, and this is what they would like to meet and confer on. If you would like COF to start proceeding, they can, but if there's a change here, then you're going to have to pay them extra because now we're going to change the parameters. I will make the meetings occur as quickly as I can, and I hope at the latest I would bring it back to you at your next meeting. But I do want to remind council that we do have that request out there.
And again, I'm not totally sure that this actually triggers a meet and confer, but I can certainly understand meet and consult. Wendy, I think that might be my recommendation.
Normally how we've handled this in the past is we would show them the parameters that we're using, which is the slide after this one. There's not much more you could add. We have the finances in here, we have the population, we have the proximity. But if there's some other factor they want to propose, we would see what that does and if it jumbles up the rankings at all, if we think it's reasonable, and we would bring that back to you. As soon as I know, I honestly don't think they've looked, the ones I've received the request from, I don't think they've looked at this detail. I don't know that they know what's actually in it. I will make sure they have it as quickly as possible and ask them for their input as quickly as possible.
And how quickly is quickly as possible?
First thing tomorrow morning was my plan,
Okay.
to reach out to them.
Okay. Okay.
Wendy, are you suggesting that we hold off on this until the 4th of April?
It would really be my suggestion that we firm this up. I know that that adds 2 weeks, but I will also say I don't think that that's going to delay your city manager recruitment, assuming we change the title to city manager. You have the RFP tonight. If you award, the contract would come back at the next meeting. You have the community input and the profile and all those pieces that have to happen before you get to actually advertising. So I really don't think that this is going to delay getting to the actual advertising and recruitment.
Okay.
Any significant amount.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So are we in a, ready for a motion to move forward? I mean,
well, if I'm understanding correctly, and if Ms. Kaneko's understanding correctly, if I provide this and they have no further feedback, I'm going to give Ms. Kaneko the go-ahead to proceed on council's direction that was received tonight. If they do have feedback, I will bring it back to you as quickly as possible.
But it'll be at the next council meeting.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's exactly what we're saying.
Okay.
no. So that means we're moving forward. That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right.
Thank you once again, Katie. Thank you so much.
Can we take 5 minutes?
Yeah, why don't we take just a quick little 3-minute, 5-minute recess?
It's really weird you didn't get that email.
Yeah. Till yesterday. At 4 o'clock. And I was in meetings all last night.
Yes, I do.
But yeah, she's been hunting us down for
I know.
this.
He snuck in right at the last minute.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
You guys did all this reading too. A lot of reading. How you doing?
How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How you been?
Where do you get your council friends, man?
Nice to see you.
This guy always wears blue every time.
I almost recommended Bill.
Because I wish I would have had this earlier. I said, I got it Friday.
Thank you, everybody. If we could resume. Believe it or not, we're still on workshop because we have to discuss item E4, which are the dates for governance. So, Mr. Manfredi, you can't leave yet. Scheduled governance workshop, and this report is by Sonia Alvarez. We're trying to get the council together to agree on a date.
That's correct, Mayor and Council. We have provided some potential dates for you. We have an option A, which focuses on just Saturday workshops from 8:30 to 2 p.m. Two of the dates, the meetings would occur here at City Hall. If we hold it on June 2nd, it'll be out at the golf course. And then option B gives you an opportunity to break down the workshop into 2 evening sessions within the same week, and we provided some dates for you. Evening meeting would be 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. At City Hall, and that is these dates are in consultation with the facilitator, Ron Manfredi.
Now, I'm sorry, continue?
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
So the Saturday workshop is almost 6 hours, and the other two equate to 4 hours. Is that because there's going to be like a break or lunch or something like that? Or is there more in store for us if we do it on a Saturday?
I think Mr. Manfredi can respond to that.
Yeah, are we playing 9 holes or?
At least
my ego is much too big for golf. My concept is that we would have a 5+ hour situation. Obviously, if it's unified in one day, it's better. I thought we would have a light fruit breakfast at 8:30. If you're going to blow most of your Saturday, you ought to be able to chance to eat a little bit, and just time for people to have some coffee and get settled and started at 9. The reason why we put the 2-hour sessions is because we don't want to ruin your night any more than we have. And I just I mean, the ideal thing is to hold it in one day, okay?
I would agree.
And then the other ideal then would be not ideal, but the secondary factor is if you're going to split up, then don't go over a 2-week period, have it all in that week. Yeah. That's why we put it this way.
I agree. I mean, when we're talking governance in a workshop, sometimes you get into a flow, and if we can do it all at once, this is just my personal opinion, if we can do it all at once and get into the flow of things and have a good governance workshop.
Yeah, sure, and it's your availability that we're talking about,
right,
because it's not easy to get
so
your
that would be
folks
my
together.
Preference. And so that's preference 1 that I will ask the council, and then 2, the dates. Again, personally, I am available all 3 dates, although May 12th is my wedding anniversary, but for the sake of the city, I will be available.
Call
May 12th as well.
your wife up.
Yeah. Don't tell her.
Yeah, May 12th won't work for
that.
that week. So April 7th or June 2nd would be fine for me.
Councilman Oliver.
No, I just wanted to check in with Sonia to see if Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez had a chance to convey to you his availability, since I think it was his recommendation to hold these.
When I had originally polled the council, we were out to June dates for Saturdays, and he said he would be available June 2nd.
Okay.
June 2nd, June 16th, and June 23rd.
Right. We eliminated some of those other dates based on what Mr. Manfredi had recommended.
Okay.
Well, I thought we wanted to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I don't want to go that long. I think we need to work on that a lot sooner.
All right, so what are the new dates?
So with the council members that are here, what
April 7th.
do we all agree that one workshop on a Saturday is best?
Mm-hmm.
So we've gotten that part. So now the 3 dates in front of us are the April, May, or June. And are there any of those that will not work for any council member?
Yeah, May 12th is out for me.
Okay, so May 12th is out. So April 7th or June 2. And again, I think we wanted to get to this sooner rather than later.
Well, I realize. I mean, if you want as many folks that can be there, I don't know. Madam Clerk, Councilmember Rodriguez said, what about June, or did he say it was only available June 2nd, or he was not?
Oh, no, originally we had offered June dates because none of these dates that we had suggested were working for, there were conflicts throughout the council, so. But now we're looking at it again to actually hold a session possibly here at City Hall as opposed to off-site. So the sooner dates opened up.
So could we put April 7th, and then we can be in contact with Mayor Pro Tem, and if for some reason it does not work, we could move it to June, but I think April 7th on a Saturday, sooner rather than later, and one day would work out best for us.
And then what I'll do is I'll hold April 7th, and then if you get back to me and say it's June 2nd, then I can work a little slower.
Okay.
Sounds
good.
Either one. But I do think you should make the decision soon.
April 7th
I'm
here.
good with April 7th.
April 7th would be here at City
Here
Hall.
at the council chambers.
City Attorney, is that okay to ask that council member outside of the meeting and the city clerk?
You should be watching live streaming and texting somebody.
Yeah. Did he text you? Not supposed to.
No, he shouldn't.
Okay, so I think
Okay.
I think we have direction, and somebody will be in touch with you to solidify
Sonia will
that
be.
date.
Yes, I'll follow up.
Does Sonia and I talked about this earlier today. Does the council want me to stick around for your discussion regarding the firms that you're looking at for the recruitment? I mean, I'm good either way. I don't have to be. It's up to you guys.
I'll make it your call, Ron.
Well, I have a couple ideas that I could like to share with you.
If that's something you want to share, then sure.
Okay. Should I do it now and then?
Let me call it up and
Okay. Is that okay, folks?
just let me get to the item and open it up.
Okay.
We've done consent calendar, so we're moving on to item C1. This is consideration of a resolution approving a contract with Reftelis Financial Consultants, Inc.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Basically, the council had given direction for us to move forward with Reftelis to utilize their services. And basically, per my staff report, I'm just asking council if you want us to move forward with that. If so, there's a contract here to be considered for approval, and we can move forward now. And basically, it's my desire to see if it's council's desire to move forward in a manner that would facilitate a timely reduction in water rates for the upcoming fiscal year, should those conclusions be found during the study. If there are any significant changes in assumptions that result from the management compensation study or other costs related to the water fund that Mr. Manfredi is looking at as well, those could be factored in even after Reftelis provides their services. I did discuss that with them, and so I'd be glad to answer any questions the council has. There's two phases to this staff report. One would be to approve the contract and direct us to move forward with the contract and authorize the mayor to sign the contract on behalf of the city. The other one would be to the consideration of a resolution for a budget amendment to provide for that $18,740 amount to the water fund budget. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have, but that's about all I have to explain.
Great, Tim. Thank you very much. Any questions of Mr. Prisbila regarding this report? We're good? Great. Mr. Manfredi, is this is your opportunity?
I think it was the...
Was it the next one?
I think
Okay.
it was
I didn't know if it was the water one or not.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve item C1A as presented.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve item C1A. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve item C1B as presented.
Second.
Once again, it's been properly moved and seconded to approve item C1B as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to item C2, this is second reading and consideration of adoption of an ordinance adding Title 10, Chapter 2 to Section 13. Mr. Boyle.
Thank you, Mayor Medellin. Esteemed council members, it's always a pleasure to be before the council, and no one could be more pleasure than bringing the final steps in the adoption of an ordinance that would provide for the acquisition of lands consistent with the Quimby Act. The Planning Commission recommended this item to you in February. You introduced the item at your last City Council meeting. Completing the two steps before you tonight would complete that process. The first step would be adoption of the ordinance, and the second would be adoption of a resolution, which would set that fair market value and insert that as a component of the ordinance itself. At the Planning Commission meeting, as well as the City Council, there has been no stated opposition. And with that, staff's recommendation was to take those steps necessary to complete that process. That completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any questions regarding this particular item? Councilwoman Gallegos.
Chris, I just wanted to get this cleared because I'm a little confused here, that we're going to be doing a fair market value on the land for the developer, and we talked about appraisals, correct, on the Quimby Act?
Thank you for that question. Per the council's direction, we included an opportunity for a developer to go through an appraisal process, if they so desired, to define an alternative fair market value. The council is establishing an initial fair market value of $50,000 per acre within this adoption process, and that also has the caveat that if a developer wished to have an alternative appraisal, there's a process there for them to do so. The council periodically could alter the fair market value and provide direction to staff to complete analysis necessary to do that.
Okay, so in that wording that it can come back to council any time to change that. Is that what you're saying that the ordinance is stating?
Staff works at the discretion of the council, yes.
Okay.
I think to more directly answer your question, yes, the ordinance does built in the ability for you to reset that multiplier, for lack of a better term, for their fair market value periodically as you see fit. So. Okay.
And the appraisal is the cost is on the developer?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's it. Any other questions, Mr. Boyle? Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sonia, are we reading title on this?
That's correct. If we could take C2A first, then we can read the title on that, and the council can vote, and then proceed to C2B.
C2B is title.
C2A is for title.
Okay, so you want me to do B first, you said?
No. We can go in the order that it's listed.
Okay,
so if
okay.
I'll go ahead and read title if that's okay.
What I'm asking, read title,
yes,
please.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Adoption of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Madera, California, adding Section 1300 to Chapter 2 of Title 10 of the Madera Municipal Code in order to establish a method for coordinated acquisition and development of city park facilities.
So move to approve.
Mr. Mayor, I actually want to make a motion to waive further reading.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And adopt.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to waive further reading and adopt the ordinance. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item B.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve item C2B as presented.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve item C2B. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that. As mentioned before, item D1 is not on the agenda, so we'll move into administrative reports. Item E1, this is a consideration of a minute order approving the Madera County Economic Development Commission 2018-19 annual basic service level budget. Mr. Khan.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Bobby Khan, Executive Director of Madera County Economic Development Commission, 2425 West Cleveland Avenue, Suite 101. This is our annual basic service level agreement. We come before you every year, as we do the other two jurisdictions. As you can see through the staff report, I'm not going to belabor it. The only increase was a 0.8% increase this year, and that's just due to population number adjustments. Other than that, the budget is we brought forward. We decided just to work within the same budget as we did last year and just make things happen. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Bobby. Any questions of Mr. Khan at this time? Councilman Oliver.
Thank you, Bobby. I just had a couple questions, comments. I'm just curious, have we, and obviously I'm speaking to a couple different hats. My day job, I work for an economic development organization, which obviously is not tied to the Madera EDC. It's a separate organization, but I'm familiar with the arena. And are we looking at other funding opportunities for the agency? I know, like with our organization, for example, we do utilize a lot of what you would consider social services or workforce dollars, in that we help bring industry and businesses to the table to meet their hiring needs. Have we looked at any other pots of money, so to speak, that might be coming down from the state or be available local? Or
Well, the county, that's exactly what we do with the county, is that the funding that we receive from the county is through CalWorks dollars. Okay. So our entire portion of the county budget is funded through a contract with Department of Social Services. So which makes it nice for them because we don't touch their general fund. So we're already taking a substantial amount of DSS money, or CalWorks money. So we have worked with Workforce in the past, but mostly on special projects.
Not so much as in form of business incentives or things like that.
Oh, we work with them on business incentives as far as wage and salary programs that they have. They're certainly a stakeholder at our table at all times too. Same with Department of Social Services. They just ran out a new program that we've been working with our local employers to make sure that they're aware of, and we've been getting them signed up for the program so that they can take advantage of these opportunities to save payroll dollars.
Great. I think my next question, it also kind of pivots into a comment. Really is, what is your, if you had a request of us beyond just financially as far as funding and budget, but more of, hey, I need additional tools to make Madera attractive. We have too low of a vacancy rate when it comes to an industrial commercial land. We're being, beat out when looking at other cities and what they have available because we don't have enough land within proximity to Highway 99. What are some of those things, Bobby, that we should hear as a council and incorporate in our decision making? And I don't know if there's anything off the top of your head, and then kind of pivoting to a comment, moving forward with this contract, I would love to see your agency's participation at least once a year or twice a year in kind of a workshop on economic development, and it should be a two-way street. It should be of an update as far as the trends and some of the interest and qualified leads that are coming down the pipeline. And I know that we have great representation on that board as well. And then two, what are the things that we as a city should be aware of and preparing for that would help economic developers such as yourself to do your job, be successful?
Well, I've had the opportunity, since Councilmember Rigby is you're the council's representative, we've had this discussion, and one of the things that we're doing moving forward in the next 3 weeks, I believe it is that we will be doing a strategy session with just our executive committee, and we have invited the city administrators and the county administrative officer to attend. My intent for that meeting is to reevaluate all the strategies or explain, I think maybe it'd be better to say, explain all the work that we do, and then talk about the different strategies, not only marketing, but retention and expansion, which is critical and actually can create more jobs than attraction at times. So I think after that would be a great time to come back, discuss with the council some of those things. Other workshops I think that we would be interested in having is taking a look at the city and seeing where is your future industrial growth. My knowledge of your general plan is that most of that scheduled growth is for south of Pecan down to Avenue 12. But then again, we run out of infrastructure at Pine and Pecan, so it's kind of a catch-22. We need to strategize, I think, as a group, and especially as a city, where you want to go, and I think you've identified that through your general plan. But then, how do you want to get there? Do you want to spend the money to develop a specific plan, and then, or maybe your staff is you have very competent staff. Maybe they could put together some type of specific plan and a time frame. Then there's always the funding mechanisms. Can we get money from the state? You know, where can we get this money? You know, it's very tricky to get CDBG or EDA money because you have to have, you know, the job creator in hand before they'll fund it. So it's always a catch-22. But I think that's what, you know, we need to do is just, you know, set direction.
Yeah, I agree, and I've received this feedback in my position, and I know a lot of folks, a lot of electeds, they care less about the journey and more about the destination. And I think what really stands in front of us is we have a very, very low vacancy rate of industrial land. We should be very aggressive and eager to see how we can proactively address that. I think there are many different tools and ways to go about it, EFIDs being one, with a willing participant like the county. So I think it'd be good to bring back that discussion more than once a year, and for this board to, you know, collaborate as to different ideas or areas that we'd like to invest in to necessitate that type of job generating opportunity.
Right, and I think that, you know, the city, you know, took a relatively aggressive step when we went out and, you know, offered the deferment of land prices to a developer that wants to come in on the city property. You know, the challenge we have there is finding the industrial developers that want to come into our market. You know, fortunately, we have one here, a very substantial one here in town that we have already worked that deal with, and they're going to be building 40,000 square feet roughly coming out of the ground soon. That will be a help. But in reality, you know, I'd like to see 100,000 square feet or 200,000 square feet because, like you said, we got a 0.53% vacancy rate, and we've been there for over a couple years. So it makes it, what it is that when we send out requests for proposals, when we answer those proposals, you know, we talk about build-to-suit, and we talk about building buildings, and we tell them we can build a building in 6 months in the city of Madera. But nobody believes that because these people, you know, are used to working in other jurisdictions where it takes a year just to get their permit, let alone have the building built in a year.
Yeah.
So I mean, those are discussions I'm happy to have.
I get that. I think it goes to a marketing strategy too, because I don't know that on our EDC website or City of Madera website that we even tout that as an incentive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we touted when we talk to people. We talk about time is money, and we will definitely save you time.
So, well, I think the strategy session is a good idea. Picking off those low-hanging fruits, like, you know, and kind of in line with our incentive program that we're developing. I hope that you'll be a part of that process too. And but I'd like to bring back an economic development discussion at least twice a year. I think it should be something that's active and ongoing, and yeah, I think that'd be fruitful.
Happy to do it.
Agree. I absolutely. This answered some of my questions, Bobby. They're very good questions, and thanks for that information. Plan and strategy is kind of the notes that I had here, Bobby, and that. What is that plan of attack, and what are our strategies, and then what do we do to implement that, and then when we get to our short-term goal, say a year, have we come back and measured that and recognized where we fell short, or some of the successes we had, and then to kind of piggyback on Councilman Oliver, his point in that where we fall short, is that because of the missing link, the missing tools or resources that it takes to get there? I understand that the responsibility is great, and you're, in a sense, kind of an office of one. I know there's three of you, of course. So maybe if you just kind of touch a little bit, Bobby, on kind of some of your targets, maybe some of your set goals in strategies for the year, and then what we do to meet those goals, and kind of use that as a measuring stick.
Right. Well, obviously, our goals, the world of economic development is kind of like the world of science. You know, we're very unexact, and it's very hard to quantify. You know, you're going to have X amount, you're going to accomplish X amount. What we do is we want to accomplish X amount of activities that we know that drive businesses to Madera, drive expansion, drive retention. And then what we do is we take a look at that at the end of every year, and we actually put it out in our annual report on how many jobs that were created, how many people, how many meetings did we have, and how many, because you can't do economic development. It's like selling real estate. You can't do it by sitting at a desk. And you have to be out in front of the brokers, the site selectors, and you have to make your community well known, and you have to make it attractive. And one of the things that I picked up on, and out of all places, was a site selector in Chicago talking about agriculture and food processing, because that's what he does, is food processing. So we're coming back right now and developing a new piece of marketing material based strictly around agriculture, where we rank in agriculture, why you need to be in Madera County if you want, if you're a food processor, this is where you need to be. You need to be in the center of the state around the product. So we're kind of, shifting gears on that. It was a piece that, when he said it, he showed me a couple of just little postcard things that he received from people like from New York and stuff. And I said, well, we can beat those numbers by a long ways. So,
Sure.
So those are some of the things, with the industry targets, obviously food processing and logistics are at the top of the list, but we don't overlook any.
But you do, which kind of led me to my next question. So we are kind of a target specific, basically, instead of just a mass who wants to move to Madera, being the rich agriculture community in the Central Valley. Would you say you kind of target more of the 99 corridor, the ag-based type of industry?
That's one of our top priorities. It's definitely not our only priority.
Right.
I mean, we talk to people about all types of projects, and then about logistics because time to market, and it used to be, everybody was down in L.A. or everybody was up in the Bay Area, but now they're kind of adjusting their time to market, and that's why the San Joaquin Valley is starting to get a harder look for logistics, is that. We're between Madera and Visalia is a small window period of overnight delivery by UPS to both ends of the state. You can't find that anywhere else. So now all of a sudden people are starting to get aware of that, and you're starting to see these logistics, especially as we move towards the outdated, or I don't want to say outdated, the traditional distribution center where product came in and then shipped out. And some of that put us at a disadvantage because we weren't, we're in the middle of the state, but we're also equidistance away from two big markets. Right. So if they could be up in the Manteca, up in that area, Lathrop, Tracy area, that was great for the Bay Area. And it's still a hot area. And the same thing with the Inland Empire. I mean, if you go to the Inland Empire, or you fly over it, it's millions and millions of square feet of distribution centers. But now with the one-day delivery or next-day delivery, the fulfillment element, now they're starting to say, well, you know what? The San Joaquin Valley, the places like Madera, California, they're right in the middle. Yeah. Now it becomes a different focus because they need to get to the Bay Area and they need to get to L.A. and overnight, because that's what everything is now, is overnight delivery.
Yeah, it's
changing. So it's actually played to our favor.
Any outreach, I think I know the answer to this, but any outreach internationally, or friends to the south or to the north?
Not so much the friends to the north. We have had communications with, our friends to the south, with Mexico. The thing that, and we participated a lot with the Central Valley EDC, who we do a lot of work with, and we did a study on foreign direct investment in the valley and where it's coming from. Unfortunately, international travel is very expensive, so it's we have to figure out where we're going to get the biggest bang for our dollar. If we want to start focusing on international marketing or international travel, international marketing really requires international travel to develop the relationships that you need to have in those countries. We've been invited many times to Germany and to Asia with the Bay Area Council, but to go to Asia with the Bay Area Council is like a $10,000 trip for like 5 days, and I have a hard time justifying $10,000 in marketing for a one-time trip, and my whole marketing budget is $40,000 for the year.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit hamstrung on that. I want to compliment Will's organization and Fresno EDC and Leanne Eager, who does have the budget, does travel, and she does represent not just Fresno, but she does do a good job of talking about the San Joaquin Valley. So our connections through the Central Valley EDC, have paid off there, and she's a great ambassador for us. Would we like to do more of that? Yeah, but it's really, we have to be strategic on where we're spending our dollars.
Sure. Councilman Rigby, who is also our appointment and serves on the board at the Madera EDC, has a...
I think you answered several of the questions as you kind of got into discussion with our mayor, but I just kind of want to, make it known that our EDC has been nothing but amendable to suggestions that are coming from the City Council via me, as well as our representatives from the Board of Supervisors. And I think that we have such an interesting and unique opportunity with several of the Board of Supervisors having had a history with the City of Madera, willing to kind of work together, and there's less competition, it feels like, and Bobby seems to be utilized more as a tool now and less of leverage. And so, Bobby, I appreciate you willing to take the critical look at EDC and even alluding to, as you did tonight, the sort of the change in business. As attractive as brick and mortar is, as everyone's wanting to see that Target built and wanting to see the Costco come in, I think that it's good to know that e-commerce is kind of changing the game, and the 99 corridor has become such a hot place, and I value your willingness to kind of reach outside of the box and begin to have these discussions. And I think that summit that we're going to host in April, some great things are going to come of that. And so I appreciate your willingness to kind of work in a different arena, maybe, because business just isn't being done the same way it was 15, 10 years ago.
You have to be willing to change, especially in our business. It's evolving so fast these days. The curves. I was just over at CalEd, and they were showing the curves of change and how fast things are changing and how much faster they're going to be changing in the next 5 years. So it's an interesting element. We're talking about brick and mortar versus e-commerce and what it's doing, but there's still that lifestyle that people like to go shopping too. So there's a balance that has to be drawn, and that's the pressure that's on the development side, the developers that traditionally had these models that they used year after year after year, like the Targets of the world. And now, they're saying that we have to take a real deep dive on our analysis, because we can't go in there and build a store and then have it not be profitable in 5 years. Their models are all 20-year models.
Councilman Oliver.
Real quickly, Bobby, as far as foreign direct investment, I would definitely encourage, as we look at missions in our marketing budget, if it's possible, and I think it's invite only, but to engage the Department of Commerce on Select USA, which is the foremost conference for foreign direct investment. That's held in Washington, D.C. I know that's one that my boss has attended with some of my staff for a few years, and it's been very fruitful. And then the other two is kind of how do we transfer the information or knowledge that you and your colleagues have to City Hall? Because when I think about prospective business, I think about that company that's coming through the door, that's meeting with our planners, that's meeting with our building staff, and they might say, hey, I want to open a facility. I'm going to look at hiring 30 people. And so how is the automatic trigger of, well, if you're going to add 30 jobs, you're probably a great candidate for California Competes, which is a state tax credit. Or if you're looking at other options out of state, PG&E's economic development rate may save you 30% in electricity costs. So I think what I like to see with this budget moving forward is more of that training the planner, so to speak, where some of our staff are trained in economic development as well, as far as some of the tools that are readily available, because I think, to me, that presents a great opportunity. Chris Boyle sees more of prospective business and industry than really anyone here on a day-to-day basis. So I think it would behoove us if he didn't have the knowledge, or his staff didn't have the knowledge or training to say, you could look at this as well, and we'll provide that added value and help you, be very competitive. So just maybe food for thought, something we can add
Yeah, going back to Select USA, I was with your boss the last 2 days, and so she and I have talked about that. And so, we're going to be taking a hard look at participating in Select USA. It is a premier opportunity for foreign direct investment. And then as far as the staff of Madera, basically, the way, I'm happy to you got a bunch of smart people. They're easy to train. Yeah. I don't think they take much time to train them on those types of things. But I think it's also important that we remember that the EDC needs to be part of this team that sits around here, as well as the team that sits on the dais. Because if Chris has somebody come in to talk to him about opening a business in Madera, I'm hoping that Chris will call me and say, "Hey,
definitely,
come on over," because then we can, we can put his expertise together with our expertise, and I think it's even better. And we do a lot of that. I know that I certainly encourage any business we're talking to sit down with the development team from Madera to talk. And you have a great team, like I said.
I agree, and they should have a piece of marketing material with the EDC stamp on it that has your contact information to get more information, but there are going to be some leads that just happen to come through City Hall that don't go through the EDC, and then vice versa. So I would just really encourage that training. I think it'd be beneficial to our staff.
Not a problem.
Great.
Awesome. Great. Any other questions of Mr. Khan? Bobby, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. If there is no further discussion or questions, I will entertain a motion for item E1.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve item E1 as presented.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve item E1. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item E2, this is review and direction regarding responses received for RFP number 201718-09. Ms. Silva.
Let me pull up. This is jumping on me. Your rank information. Is that displaying okay on your screens? Readable?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. So the city put out the RFP in compliance with the purchasing policy. The council received 3 proposals. Springstead Waters, Coffin Associates, and Bob Murray and Associates. Those proposals all had slightly different variations on the scope of work and slightly different variations on their proposed pricing structure. Those were provided to council, and based on review of the proposal, this was council's ranking of the proposals. Council can decide to award an agreement based on the paper screening. Council could also, I guess you would appoint maybe a committee to interview either all 3, the top 2, and determine if you think there's a better fit. This person's going to be your best friend in this search for the next several months, but I will defer that to council.
It seems pretty unanimous here, Wendy, that 5 of the 6 who are attending tonight agree with Bob Murray and Associates.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to hear Councilmember Hawley's maybe advocate for Coffin Association.
On the chart.
You ranked Coffin Association as your
second.
Number 1 option. Everybody else did something.
You're just curious if
there was a major reason as to why.
No, there wasn't. I was just looking at something. I did at the time, but I'm agreeable with everyone.
I might just interject then, Mr. Mayor, knowing that I don't have to, but the reason why I selected Bob Murray and Associates as my number 1 was I valued kind of the structure of how the organization was going to go about looking for the permanent position. I like community involvement. I like their willingness to sort of reach out and kind of think outside of the box as we structure the profile of the person we're going to be recruiting, as well as the timeline. I kind of appreciated the willingness to work within our timeline, but I don't know if we need to. spend too much time on it.
Yeah, I think time is of the essence, and like I said, it seems pretty clear that the council feels basically the same way, and I would agree. I think they had a great proposal, and I'm sorry?
I think Mr. Manfredi, this was the...
Okay, yes. And so with that, Ron, I know you wanted to make some comments.
And I want to apologize to council. First of all, I didn't realize that this was set so soon. I want to point out a couple things that I want to say. This is the most important decision as a council that you're going to make. And we just put the 2 weeks hold on the compensation study, and you can't begin the official recruitment until you finish the compensation study, so a couple more weeks won't hurt you. I'm not advocating for one firm over the other. The Texas firm, no. They don't have any California experience, if you look at that. Now, I just had the chance to look at this today. And some of the factors that you may want to consider, because I like the idea that your Human Relations Director, Wendy Silva, brought up regarding interviewing these folks. And you could do this over the phone. You could put together a couple council members and a couple of staff members. I would suggest your city manager, city administrator, and your Human Resources Director, because they understand. Now, I'm going to disagree a little bit regarding the proposals. I think that, by the way, Bob Murray is the most experienced. Everybody, a lot of folks use them. They're the most experienced. And I just worry about the possibility of a cookie-cutter approach, and probably do well. I've run several of these for small organizations and been a part of much larger organizations with State Center as a board member and as a community committee member for college presidents and chancellors, as well as recruitment for several cities, both city administrator, manager, and police chief. And while I think actually that the COF one is more customized, written for you folks, especially regarding the conversation of community involvement and input. And they look, they're the same price, but if you want much of that and you want some subcommittees, then they're going to charge you more. To take a closer look at that, I think you have the opportunity to negotiate, because you don't quite know yet what you want to do. Okay, how many structured committees are you going to have? Are you going to have a parallel citizens committee, which I don't think is a good idea, but you could do it, and then have your own committees? Are you going to have a professional committee composed of people like maybe the superintendent of Madera Unified School District, and maybe a member from the Board of Supervisors, maybe a local prominent business person? How are you going to set up the community input situation? I like the idea of bringing together 20 or 25 more of stakeholders, folks who are involved both at the high business level and at maybe the neighborhood watch level. And I was going to put that together for you, but I didn't realize you had this time frame, and I can put it together in a few days.
Well, it was my understanding that that is something that we could still manufacture with whoever we choose.
Right. So make sure you know what they're going to charge you, because the Bob Murray one, as I understand it, it's going to charge you extra for each additional thing you do. So I'm just saying, I don't know. I actually don't know, because we haven't talked to them. The other factors are that I'm not trying to advocate for COF, but they're going to know your agency pretty doggone well. Okay, they're going to know your staff pretty well, and they're going to have a sense of what you might need. So all I'm suggesting, because you see, time is not of the essence. Okay, you have a stable, good city manager, city administrator right now. You have a situation where you've pushed forward, and you've had to, I realize, because of the labor interest in that, to where that study is not going to be ready for you for 10 weeks, because 8 weeks to do it and 2 weeks to analyze it, et cetera. So you're not going to have that much to do. I'm just saying you might want to take the chance. I mean, I think you're going to be safe with Bob Murray. I think you're going to be safe because they have the experience. But are you going to get the customized situation? I'm not advocating, Texas is out. They don't have one recruitment they did in California, and California is unique. I'm saying that in a positive way. Who's ever chuckling? And so some of the other factors are utilize your staff. Ms. Silva is the president of the San Joaquin Valley Risk Management Authority. Okay, that's your risk manager. That's your insurance company. That's contact with 56 cities from Sacramento to Tehachapi. She could survey some of those folks. Now, did you realize that COF did something for MID recently?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody talk to them? See if they like them or not? Okay. So I'm just saying, you know, these are some things you want to consider. I think you're going to get a good situation, a good professional firm with either of those two. Bob Murray is the true practice, and it'll probably, you know, if I were to bet on it, I'd still bet on them. But I'm just saying that take the opportunity to maybe throw a committee together, 2 council members. You know, don't go the ad hoc committee. Go 2 council members and 2 staff members, because your staff is so valuable in this process. One last recommendation. People are going to start contacting you. They start contacting me. Okay? Be careful. Be careful. You'll see folks come in and they'll be the economic development specialist. Your economic development specialist just left. Okay? I always say, you want to sell business to your community, flush the toilet and vacuum the house. Let the economic development take care of itself. That's a secondary expertise. People will start contacting you, and be careful regarding contacting them back. Because what happens is you fall for the guy or gal, because they talk to you. And I tell you, these city managers are pretty slick talkers. I know that from personal experience. Okay? So what I'm trying to get to you is that I'm trying to give you a heads-up warning, because it doesn't mean that you can't ask so-and-so to apply. That's good. If you know somebody you think they're sharp, but get away. Don't get involved in a relationship where they're calling you, and you're probably already being lobbied now, especially those folks of you who get around a little bit more in the bigger regional areas. So again, pardon my lecturing tone, but you hired me, and I'm not going to cut any slack on it.
Councilman Oliver has a question.
I think those are good points. I think for me, it is the most important decision. It's really a quarter-century decision, potentially, and I think we have to do it right. I think what put Bob Murray and Associates ahead of the pack for myself was they had built in or had mentioned in their response about the community input at the front end in developing the candidate profile. I think that's very important. I think that's going to take some time to do. However, in their bid too, they also quantify some of those costs as far as the additional meetings and visits out here, which, you know, encouraging that community input are going to probably cost a few dollars, so or a few extra dollars. So I think they're still my preferred. I would be open to if you know, staff and if Wendy even has the time and a couple of council members wanted to sit down with her and maybe have a follow-up discussion specific to the community input areas, I would be open to that. I think that's the most important thing. I think that during this process we're going to have to take a step back and let the process play itself out, let the community be involved. And
yeah, and remember, I'm not saying that you don't pick Murray. I'm just saying that you maybe step back, because time, you want to keep it moving,
yeah,
but you're not really going to put out the announcement until you know if there's going to be any salary or benefit changes. Am I correct? I mean, okay.
Yeah.
So therefore, that's not going to be in front of you. What'd you say? 8 weeks plus time to, was that right? A couple of weeks to analyze it?
But in all fairness, we've asked them to meet a timeline. We've asked each one of these people to meet a specific timeline, give us a proposal, and then we need to choose that proposal. I'm not sure the gray area between coming back and saying we want to now change that. I want to be fair. They did what they were supposed to with these proposals, and so now can we go back and say, no, we want to renegotiate? Or
No, absolutely. We had a timeline for submitting their proposal. We told them which council meeting we'd be bringing the proposals to. That is the only commitment. to a specific timeline. We did ask them to propose their timeline for conducting the recruitment, and in the proposals, you can see they're all pretty actually similar.
Right.
Some of that timeline is just going to be driven by what do we decide the community input process is.
Which I agree with Councilman Oliver. That was I've worked with Bob Murray before. He helped us hire our housing authority director, or they as a company, and that was very, very important to us as well as to the company and community input, which is something that I think this council has promised the community as we hire the next city manager on just how valuable that is, amongst other things. There may be an additional cost that we can certainly sit down with them, and my threshold, Mr. Manfredi, I think if I would have maybe seen a couple of more council members that were either on the fence or back and forth, I think we can have that open discussion. I just saw this as kind of overwhelming,
Yeah.
that Bob Murray seemed to be the...
And what I'll do, through Wendy, of course, and Steve, I will give you some input recommendations regarding part of my contract in writing in the next several days regarding some of the focuses on what I've seen work and not work, and some emphasis.
That would be great.
Because you see, what you want to do is that, and this is your call. We have a very active, involved city council. When I recruited, I said, you hired me to be your interim city manager, you hired me to recruit, and now I'll turn over 3 qualified people for you. If you want to put a council member on the panel, that's fine. But remember, you're going to get probably jealous of that council person. So the process is a good process. Whoever does it is a good process. The cream rises to the top. Then you get 3, 4 qualified people, and you will, because of this community and the size of it and the dollars involved. Then it becomes a chemistry situation. Okay, but if you get involved, you guys get involved too early and start picking favorites, believe me, it will backfire. You'll get irritated with each other, and it won't work. So it's not that you don't get involved. Your ideas get involved early, but boy, you know, I've sat on literally hundreds of these over a very long career. And the dedication that one of your staff members brings to another city, and the dedication that the other professional staff members come and bring, is just incredible. They want, and they put aside their relationships and their friendships, and they give you good, objective input because they are so proud of their profession and so protective of their profession. So you put together the good panels, and you want to have 2 or 3 panels.
Sure, absolutely.
Get them down, screening panel, professional interview panel, then the decision makers.
I agree. Councilman Hawley has a question.
Yeah, I didn't have a question for you. I just wanted to, Councilman Rigby asked me a question a while ago, and I had to go back to my notes. The reason I chose Coughlin Associates, I'm looking at, we already used them as the other study, and I think there is a cost savings in that, and instead of trying to have 2 or 3 agencies working on something for the city, was something I didn't really want to see. So that was really my, and I saw the cost savings that was going to save us.
Right, that 1,000.
And they're already working for us, so that was my reason.
No, those are great reasons.
They're a great company. I wasn't trying to say no.
No, I mean, I wasn't using your comment. I was just referring back to him.
I was just saying maybe you want to give it looking at it a different way. But Murray's going to be a good selection. Just make him compete a little bit. I'll let you go ahead. I mean, I'm not.
No, I appreciate. I do appreciate your input. I do.
Excuse me, I have a public comment.
Public comment is closed.
Regarding this specially.
Public comment was in the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you for the spirit of the democracy.
So do we need to vote on this, or?
If I'll certainly take any other questions or concerns from the council. Mr. Manfredi makes some good points as to where we go from here, but I think if tonight's direction is to choose somebody. Yeah.
So we do have 2 options, though. We can bring back an agreement at the next meeting with the fee schedule as shown in the proposed RFP response. Or we can have Mr. Manfredi's recommendations on the process provided to council, and then we can negotiate a specific contract for only those pieces and the price of them with Bob Murray and Associates, which I would actually recommend.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned that if we just enter into a blanket agreement, we're going to be nickeled and dimed.
I agree.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get Mr. Manfredi's recommendations, and we will bring them back at the next council meeting so we can have a better defined actual scope of work and process.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Wendy. And Ron, thanks for your input. I appreciate it. Moving on to item E3. This is presentation of the preliminary City of Madera capital budgets for fiscal year 18-19.
Short, same as short and sweet. Let's see, City of Madera. Okay, I think everybody knows that short and sweet is my specialty when it's necessary. And this is the preliminary capital budget presentation for fiscal year 2018-2019. This is us basically getting things flowing through the pipe. This is a beginning phase of the budget, other than the mid-year budget presentation, which we've already had. But this is really the first piece of the budget that we're bringing before council for consideration. There's no action to be taken tonight, but the question is, what is the capital budget? So capital budget includes infrastructure, property, plant, and equipment. It helps maintain or improve a city asset with a value of over $5,000, and usually a lot more than that, as seen in the 5-year CIP which council's already reviewed and was presented by the engineering department. So capital projects are funded from reserves, one-time resources, state and federal grants, and development impact fees. So compared to the operational budgets, we try to fund our current operations from our current year revenues, whereas capital projects, you build up funds over time and then buy it when the funds are available. And of course, you have the largest operational costs are personnel related and ongoing. And capital projects are considered one time and only take place when funds are available, as I mentioned. And operational costs are more consistent or smoother in nature. So here's a summary of the capital projects that included in tonight's report, a total of just over $14 million for fiscal year 18-19. So you can see $1.6 million in sewer projects and $4 million in water, and over $8 million in street projects. And these are current year budgeted projects. It's been the practice of the City of Madera to budget a capital project, and if it doesn't happen in 17-18, the dollars get carried over into 18-19 until it gets completed because the funds have already been appropriated. Just wanted to mention we're still in the middle of our move to Tyler Munis. Budget formats still will be changing. I said that last year, but we're still struggling with this. We no longer create a new account, new code every time a project is created. We do that through Project Ledger. And we're able to do that now. We're tracking the projects along with engineering through the Project Ledger, which feeds up into the budget line items that you're looking at today. The dollars are in there under pretty general descriptions such as capital outlay. There's the infrastructure study, facilities improvement, and construction/infrastructure. So there's a limited number, but in the past there would have been 2 pages of different projects listed out in this. I've really simplified this report. I'm sorry for making that pop noise, but simplified this report just to the dollar amounts in this. I think you've seen most of the detail in the 5-year CIP, the capital improvement plan. And we are still working on the perfecting the project ledger, and hopefully before the final budget is prepared, we'll be able to show you the format with that included for the final budget presentation, which will include the capital outlay by project, which will be new for the city, and just been a little bit of a challenge for us to get that accomplished. This is a summary that was in your staff report. Again, it breaks it out into basically the same categories as seen before, not by specific projects. And I'd be glad to answer any questions. This is not an action item. I kind of want to apologize for not bringing the details to council. I know one council member had contacted the City Hall to ask about previous budgets, and I got to thinking about it, and just showing the dollars doesn't give you a whole lot of information, but you had seen it in the 5-year CIP, and I would be glad to review it in detail with any of you that might be interested. We could sit down with engineering and talk about it with Jimmy and Keith or whoever. But unless there's any questions, that concludes my report.
Tim, actually, I just caught a brief. You went through quickly through the slide. You had, was it impact, the police development impact fees, $80,000. That one, and then you have the fire. There's nothing on fire. Okay.
There's nothing in fire, which kind of surprised me because I thought that we would have budgeted something in there for the new fire station.
Right.
Which I was asking Jimmy about just between the meetings, but we'll look at that, and if that needs to be added, we'll certainly add it into next year's budget.
And then, I know the monies are procured here, but what does the actual work look like for 18-19? Is all of this going to be done? A portion of it? Do we kind of have an idea on where we are with actually getting things done?
For 18-19, you mean how many of these projects do we think we'll actually complete in 18-19?
Yes. I mean, I know it's kind of, I get it. I don't expect an exact date, but I mean, are there hurdles in the way to do this? Money's here, but I mean, are we going to actually move forward with things? And what does it look? What does the forecast look like?
Well, recently you approved us of getting a temporary engineer. We've added that person on, and they're working 40 hours a week. So that's going to assist in getting to where we're at. We've got one traffic signal going to construction. It's Elm and Yosemite. We have another one that's getting ready to go to bid. And then we have a third, which is at 30% right now. So we're moving forward with that. The Olive Avenue project, that's probably one of the bigger things in there. You see about $8 million worth of street projects.
Okay.
That's coming in at about $7.5 million right now. We're still working on the project. This usually doesn't do this with me. I'm going to back up a little bit. That project is turning out to be a little bit more difficult with right-of-way and the like, and we're struggling with the funding right now. But we think we're going to go ahead and pull the funding together. There are quite a few number of pieces on that. There's right-of-way acquisition. We think we're going to be relocating at least 2 property owners. I suspect we're going to be adding on another traffic signal to that project as well, though I'm trying to go ahead and look into that. That's the Knox and Olive project. We had concerns with that recently, and I want to go ahead and try and see if we can go ahead and take another approach to go ahead and getting the palm trees out of the way. I think that the palm trees need to come out, and I might see a change on the results of that. Water projects, the water tank is moving forward. I think we're going to have the RFP out for the consultant in the next few days. That is over the course of 5 years, that's about an $18 million project, depending upon whether we reduce or not. We have a water project actually on the streets right now. That's, I want to say it's $1.5 million. It's water pipes throughout town. So we're making a good stab at it. And if we move forward with the Olive Avenue project, that'll knock $8 million off the $14 million or so.
Good. I appreciate that. And I know annually we get this report, and it's a big CIP report that kind of shows dollars and projects. But I think as we move forward for the year, and us as council members that go to a number of neighborhood watch meetings or just being pulled over at the grocery store, there's a number of people that say, what is going on? I heard there's going to be a stoplight, or when are they going to, blah, blah, blah. So rather than individual council members kind of hitting you up, if we can do some sort of informational, simple progress report to us that doesn't take you away from your everyday duties, but kind of keeps us in the loop, if you will, as to how things are progressing.
We can go ahead and do that. It's just a matter of what frequency you would like to go ahead and see it from us.
Perfect. Councilman Oliver has a question.
Keith, you just briefly mentioned our water storage project. Just curiosity, as far as the steel tariffs that have been announced or planned, what are you hearing out there as far as potential increase in costs for?
Well, I hadn't seen anything on the steel tariffs until the wastewater treatment plant came through. They're actually doing some adjustments on that with regard to, I think they're doing some ad alternates on that to go in and account for the possibility that the steel tariffs may impact that. With regard to the tank, it's that's kind of a question. How long will the tariffs be in place? Do we end up doing a metal tank versus a concrete tank? I couldn't tell you that far in advance on that particular project.
Thank you for that information, Keith. I appreciate you giving us an update on that. Any other questions from Tim regarding this report?
Informational only, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are we on to council? My pad died, so I think, are we on to council reports?
All right. Charles has got power. Take his power.
I don't even want it on. Forget it. Moving on to council reports. Starting to my far right, and Councilman Robinson.
Oh, nothing to report.
Councilwoman, Councilwoman Gallegos. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. I attended the Veterans Voice for Democracy and Patriot Pin contest winners, and wow, these kids were amazing on some of the speeches that they gave that night, and not so big of a turnout, I thought, on April 19th, I think is, or where's April? Thursday? April 17th, 19th. They're going to be saluting those emergency responders who have reached certain levels that they're going to process through voting systems through their colleagues, and that will happen on that night. This Saturday is the 5K second win that benefits the rescue mission. So anybody that wants to get out there, I don't think it's going to rain this year. Last year it rained and it was really dangerous. We had people in front of me and behind me slipping and falling. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope I don't go down. So I think we're going to have better weather this year. I also want, just for information, we have great people in our organization, and I'm going to show you a small clip of what our communication specialist and our commander put together. Joseph's still doing a few tweaks and cuts on this, so it probably won't go out to our police department on Facebook for a few weeks.
I do have something to say.
Next year. Give me a minute, something. Next
year. Yeah, hold on. She's not done yet.
And they're amazing. I didn't even think to show this tonight, but we're not going to meet for another 2 weeks, so I thought I'd like you to see it before we take it out to the public and our community.
Whether you're commuting by car or by foot, you may have noticed markings like this showing up in areas of high pedestrian foot traffic. These high-visibility crosswalks are an important part of the city's ongoing efforts to improve pedestrian safety. Pedestrians are the most vulnerable users of our transportation system, especially our youth and our seniors. According to a recent study released by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, over 5,000 pedestrians are killed each year, with more than 700 of those fatalities occurring in California alone. And sadly, Madera contributes to those statistics. The data suggests that on average, a pedestrian is killed every 2 hours and injured every 7 minutes in man versus vehicle incidents. If you're a motorist, when you're stopping at a crosswalk, make sure to stop before the markings. It is illegal to stop in or on the crosswalk. The distinct triangular markings found at high-visibility crosswalk sites are referred to as shark teeth. Not only do they provide an additional buffer space between individuals crossing and vehicles, but they also serve as a permanent reminder that Madera PD will take a massive bite out of your wallet if we catch you failing to yield properly. If you're a pedestrian, cars can appear quickly. A double take before entering the roadway can be the critical difference between crossing successfully and
As we first reported last year, this crosswalk
not.
has become
Keep in mind that the added safety benefit of high visibility crosswalks is still no match for a distracted vehicle operator. Always look to establish eye contact with approaching drivers to ensure that they are aware of your intent to cross before stepping into the street. Painted lines will not save your life at the hands of a careless motorist. You may be in a rush, but it's important you keep that in mind. Only cross when it is safe to do so. As our community grows and more people share the street, we need to be vigilant in observing traffic laws. Gino Charmani, Commander with your Madera Police Department, here and asking you to share the road.
So hashtag share the road. I have to tell you that we put some pressure on Joseph because Gino, was going to the FBI Academy, and we had basically 3 days to they'd talked about it, they'd come up with ideas, but 3 days, pull it together. Wonderful job. Thank you, everyone, for all your support and help to get this on the road, and we're going to get that out to the community once we've got our final cuts to let everybody know about our shark teeth and what they mean and how to abide by them.
Cool. Very good. Very cool. Thank you very much. Councilman Robinson.
Yes, I did attend March 15, the grand opening or ribbon cutting for Tesoro Viejo, housing project right off of Avenue 41. And I think it's supposed to be, 200 homes or more? Yeah. No, it's more than that, but it can be like 800 each year built. So I think like 30 a month. And there's also going to be a new fire station there also. And they were looking for the mayor. I said, I represent the mayor today.
I heard that. I saw it on Facebook.
Kind
Thank
of
you
look like him, too.
very much. Councilman Rigby.
The only thing I have to report is I had the opportunity to host the Central Valley Community Foundation with Councilmember Oliver and several other members of staff who made themselves available. The Central Valley Community Foundation is a philanthropy organization that brokers several accounts here in Madera, including our Arts Council, and it was fun to just kind of walk around with the former mayor of Fresno, Ashley Swearingen, and begin to dream a little bit about downtown and some attainable ideas, and then being able to sit down with other agencies as well to kind of share in the. It's just good to know that Madera is on the map for investors in Fresno, and that there is an interest in our downtown as well as other areas that are key to the growth of our city. So that was a great afternoon, and I appreciate staff taking time out of their day to sit down and hang out with the CVCF.
Very cool. Very cool. I was there for lunch.
You were there.
Councilman Hawley.
Yes, I had an opportunity to go to the college this Saturday to watch how the community come together and the college putting together to get kids and parents to go to college. They did it in English and Spanish and another language I wasn't aware of. But it was very exciting. It was 3 sessions, and, it was a lot of kids out there. I was surprised to see so many youth out there from the high school on a Saturday morning. Also, I was able to go to Chowchilla to watch the Big Brothers Big Sisters get a $50,000 grant from Golden Memorial Insurance Agency for first responders and police department for the city of Chowchilla. Now, here comes the killing part. I'm also advocating the Big Brothers Big Sisters. I am so happy to see and hear that we have some of our city staff who come on board to be a big brother. Also, the city police department has really stepped up to the plate to have at least 8 or 9 of their officers to be big brothers.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
So let you know that we're expanding, and anybody else besides Tim and myself and Mr. Boyle, we really appreciate anyone who want to come on board. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman. Councilman Oliver.
Yeah, real quickly, when was that, Tuesday or Monday? We attended a neighborhood watch meeting on Jefferson. So thank you, Sergeant Arnold, for being there, among others. There was an incident that occurred in the neighborhood with the SIU bus, so to speak, and so it was important that we came back to inform neighbors as to what was going on, and they were really appreciative of that. And it's just important with Neighborhood Watch that it's a two-way street, and we're not just there present when times are good and when crime's not occurring and for block parties and National Night Out, but when we also have to come back and share information. And I know they're very appreciative, and so thank you again for you and your team for being present there. I also wanted to update my colleagues and staff in the community on where we're at as far as the Highway 99 widening project between 12 and 17. I've included up here, and I can make available a letter to everyone else, a letter that was drafted from the San Joaquin Valley Regional Planning Agencies. That's all the directors or heads of each COG, or Transportation Commission, throughout the valley, that symbolizes their support for the Highway 99 widening project in Madera. As I spoke last time, I had mentioned that there was a very large mishap as far as how our project was going to be listed with the state through the Transportation Enhancement Program through SB1. We've been pressing Caltrans very hard and diligently to make it right. So tomorrow on the California Transportation Commission agenda, there is an item for a $53 million project, which will be a road rehabilitation project to make this project a reality. So basically it's going to go from a widening project to a road rehabilitation project that happens to add a third lane. So we are hopeful and keeping our fingers crossed that that will pass tomorrow at the CTC. If so, it will be programmed for the FY19 year, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward with implementation. There'll be, I wouldn't say small, but a little bit of a delta that still needs to be bridged, but it was good progress today shared at Transportation Commission, and so I wanted to share this letter with my colleagues, and of course, once we receive word of hopefully a positive development there, I'd be happy to have Patricia Taylor share that information with the board. So I just wanted to give that update as well.
Great, thank you very much for that. Long time coming, and so many people and different agencies trying to come together to get that widening. So I think we're close. I really do, and I'm optimistic about tomorrow. I have very little. As a matter of fact, I hate to even ask this, but I have to. That was an awesome video, Councilwoman. I think it's absolutely great that we do these service announcements for our city. But I'm a little concerned about the tiger teeth that was painted there not long ago. It seems to be chipping and coming off already. And so I don't know if it was the wrong paint used or if Keith, if you're aware of that, but it's only been a very short while and it's looking like it's 20 years old.
When they put that down, I had wanted to go ahead and get those down fairly quickly after we'd got some studies down or in place. When they put that down, I think we were on the edge of the proper temperatures, so they may have to go ahead and grind to put it back down. But that was a temperature issue.
Yeah, a great idea. I know there was an incident on Olive Avenue, and then we now have the tiger teeth and the flashing lights, and I've had a number of people call me about putting additional stoplights on Yosemite, and that's always a fun conversation. But when we did this, it was obviously the next best thing. And then with this video, I think it's really going to help.
Yeah.
But we want it to look as best as possible. So
Sure.
You're obviously aware of that, and if we can make it look neat and new, that would.
I'll go ahead and check into it. By the way, one more benefit of the shark teeth and where they actually sit. If you're able to go ahead and get the drivers to obey that and stop at the shark teeth, you don't have cars pulling up to the crosswalk, coming to a stop, and then actually having somebody step out from behind the car, somebody cruises through like that.
Yeah.
So it gives a little bit more sight distance to the pedestrian.
Yeah. All we need is them to abide by the shark teeth.
That's right.
That's the real issue. That's all I have this evening, everybody. Thank you all so very much for sticking around. And with that, I will ask Mr. Richardson for an announcement.
Yes, Mayor. The council will now adjourn to closed session in 4 separate items, the first being conference with legal counsel in pending litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D1, one case, William Spears. The next three items are all identical. That's G3 through G5. They're all conference with legal counsel and anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subdivision D2, and that's one case each.
Thank you. See you later, Lieutenant Dan. I like that name.
Oh, no, Mayor Pro Tem. I was past Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, I call the meeting back to order at 9:52.
All right, then I'll announce this out. The council met in closed session on 4 items, the first being conference with legal counsel in pending litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subdivision D1, in one matter, that was the Spears matter. No reportable action was taken. Council also met on 3 more items. Each was conference with legal counsel in anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subdivision D2, and there were 3 separate cases there. No reportable action was taken in any of those matters as well. That's all I have.
Can you adjourn the meeting, Andy? We reported out.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you. No, you're welcome, man.